Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Godlike Naruto was transported to One Piece and fell in love with Boa Hancock? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Eye of the Maelstrom. The silence was the strangest part. For years, Naruto Uzumaki's world had been a symphony of chaos. The clash of steel, the roar of jutsu, the cries of comrades, the thunderous heartbeat of war. Now, peace had settled over the elemental nations like a thick, downy blanket. It was a peace he had bled for, a peace he had nearly died to secure, and it was as unnerving as it was welcome. He sat on the carved face of the fourth Hokage, his legs dangling over the precipice, the wind a familiar friend against his face. The village of Konoha bustled below, vibrant and alive, a testament to the sacrifices of many. His purpose, the singular goal that had driven him since childhood, had been achieved. He was the hero, the savior, the child of prophecy. He was also, for the first time in his life, utterly and completely adrift. Kurama, a rumbling presence of warmth and ancient power within him, was quiet, content to bask in the shared tranquility. The other tailed beasts were free, their chakra a network of distant, friendly stars in his senses. He had mastered Sage Mode, the Six Paths power, and the chaotic energy that had once defined him was now a calm, bottomless ocean of strength. He could feel the life force of every leaf on every tree in the land of fire, hear the whispered prayers of a farmer miles away hoping for rain. He was connected to everything, a god in all but name. And yet he felt a profound and unsettling disconnect. A flicker, a wrongness. It wasn't a sound or a sight, but a feeling, like a single thread pulled from the grand tapestry of the world. Naruto's eyes snapped open. The air before him, clear and crisp a moment ago, shimmered. Not with heat, but with a distortion, as if he were looking through flawed glass. Kurama stirred within him, a low growl echoing in his mind. "Kit, what is that?" Naruto didn't answer. He rose to his feet, his body tensing, every honed instinct screaming that this was not chakra, not any energy he had ever encountered. It was the absence of it. A void. The shimmer intensified, coalescing into a dark, hairline crack in the very fabric of space. It wasn't a portal, it was a wound. The air itself began to scream. A high-pitched keen that vibrated in his bones. He took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for a kunai he no longer carried. The crack widened, splitting the view of his village in two. There was no light within it, only a pure, devouring blackness that seemed to suck the color from the world around it. The pull started then, a gentle tugging at his clothes, his hair. It was a physical force, a cosmic vacuum. He dug his heels into the stone, the monument groaning under the strain. "It's targeting you," Kurama roared, his chakra flaring to life, a desperate attempt to anchor them. "Fight it," Naruto tried. He flared his own power, a brilliant golden aura erupting around him, a sun pushing back against the encroaching night. But it was like trying to punch the ocean. The void didn't resist, it simply yielded and consumed. The pull intensified exponentially, ripping chunks of stone from the monument and pulling them into its maw. The scream of tearing reality became deafening. He saw the faces of his friends flash through his mind. Sakura, Kakashi, Sasuke, a sudden, desperate pang of loss gripping him. He had just found peace. He had just won. With a final, catastrophic wrench, the world broke. The golden aura was stripped from his body, his connection to the natural energy of his world severed as if by a blade. Sensation dissolved into a chaotic nightmare. He felt his body being pulled apart and reassembled 1,000 times a second. Light and sound ceased to have meaning. He was falling through a storm of shattered concepts, a maelstrom of nothingness where the laws of physics were a forgotten dream. The last thing he felt before consciousness abandoned him was the faint, terrified roar of his oldest friend, Kurama, being silenced. Then, there was only the fall. Pain was the anchor that brought him back to himself. A dull, throbbing ache that started in his back and radiated through every limb. The second sensation was the feeling of something soft and damp beneath him. Moss and rich earth. The third was the sound, the chirping of strange, exotic birds and the distant, rhythmic crash of waves. He smelled salt and the heavy, sweet perfume of unfamiliar flowers. Naruto's eyes fluttered open. A canopy of colossal green leaves, far larger than any he had ever seen, filtered the bright sunlight, dappling the forest floor around him. Enormous trees with thick, serpentine roots twisted towards the sky, their bark a strange shade of reddish-brown. Everything was oversized, vibrant, and overwhelmingly alive. This was not the land of fire. This was not anywhere he knew. He pushed himself up, his body protesting. He did a quick mental check. He was drained, his chakra reserves feeling sluggish and foreign, but he was whole. He could feel Kurama, a flickering ember deep within him. Exhausted and disoriented but still there. Where are we? The fox grumbled, his voice faint. I don't know, Naruto murmured, his voice hoarse. He stood, brushing dirt from his simple black pants and shirt. His senses, usually a continent-spanning net of perception, felt muted, as if wrapped in cotton. The natural energy here was different, wilder, more primal, and tinged with the salt of a vast, endless ocean. He took a step, and froze. He wasn't alone. A dozen figures had emerged from the shadows of the colossal trees, silent as ghosts. They were all women, tall and powerfully built, clad in scant, fur-lined leather and armed with bows and spears. Their faces were hard, their eyes sharp and wary. They carried themselves with the predatory grace of seasoned hunters. One of them held a strange, snake-like bow, an arrow nocked and aimed directly at his heart. Naruto raised his hands slowly, a universal gesture of peace. He let his posture relax, showing he was not a threat. There was no fear in him, only a deep, weary curiosity. Hello, he said, his voice calm and even. I seem to be a little lost. Can you tell me where I am? The women exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and confusion. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, sharp and guttural. The woman with the snake bow barked a command, and two others moved forward, spears leveled at him. Naruto didn't move. He simply watched them, his gaze placid. He could end this in a fraction of a second, but they were just cautious, not malicious. There was no need for violence. A new presence made its way through the assembled warriors, parting them like a ship through water. The air itself seemed to grow heavy, charged with an oppressive aura of command. Naruto's eyes, trained to perceive power in all its forms, narrowed slightly. This newcomer possessed a strange energy, a potent, kingly force that demanded submission. She was, without a doubt, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Impossibly tall and statuesque, with long, straight black hair that cascaded down her back, and eyes the color of dark chocolate that held a chilling, imperious authority. She wore an elaborate, flowing gown that did little to conceal her perfect figure, and a massive, living white snake with red markings was coiled around her shoulders, its head held high as if it were a second crown. She stopped a few feet from him, looking down her nose with an expression of pure, unadulterated arrogance. The other women immediately fell to their knees, heads bowed in reverence. So, the woman said, her voice a silky, melodic sound that was utterly at odds with the contempt in her eyes. This is the creature that fell from the sky. She spoke the same language as the others, but somehow, Naruto understood her. It wasn't that he knew the words, it was as if her sheer force of will imprinted their meaning directly into his mind. She was Boa Hancock, the pirate empress, the snake princess of Amazon Lily. And her beauty was a weapon said to be capable of turning any man, or woman, to stone. She expected the man before her to react as all others did, to blush, to stammer, to fall to his knees. Utterly captivated by her divine presence, Naruto simply tilted his head. Fell from the sky, I suppose that's one way to put it. Things got a little messy. He offered a small, disarming smile. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. And you are. A collective gasp went through the kneeling warriors. The sheer audacity of it, to speak so casually to their empress, to ask for her name, was unthinkable. Hancock's perfect eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. The man wasn't blushing. He wasn't stammering. He was looking at her with polite interest, as if she were just another person he'd met on the road. The lack of adoration was so alien, so utterly unexpected, that it took her a moment to process it. Her mind, so used to a specific reaction, fumbled for a response. The emotion that surfaced was not confusion, but a hot flash of pure indignation. You dare, she hissed, the temperature seeming to drop several degrees, to look upon me and not be immediately enthralled. You dare to speak so familiarly. She struck a pose, leaning back dramatically, one hand on her hip and pointing a single, elegant finger down at him. It was a practiced, iconic gesture, designed to accentuate her beauty and channel her power. Insolent worm, your ignorance is no excuse. Gaze upon my beauty and turn to stone. She unleashed her power, the marrow no am I, a wave of pure, concentrated lust and adoration that had petrified armies and shattered the wills of even the strongest men. It was as natural to her as breathing, an extension of her very being. The air shimmered with a pink, heart-shaped energy that washed over Naruto. And absolutely nothing happened. Naruto blinked. He felt a faint psychic nudge, a strange suggestion of attraction, but it was like a gentle spring ease against the mountain of his willpower and the fathomless depths of his own chakra. It slid off him without leaving a trace. He had faced the infinite Tsukuyomi. This was child's play. Turn to stone, he asked, genuinely curious. Is that some kind of jutsu? I didn't feel any chakra. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the chirping of the oblivious birds. The kneeling Kuja warriors stared, their mouths agape. Sandersonia and Marigold, Hancock's larger, more imposing sisters, exchanged looks of utter disbelief. No one had ever resisted the Empress's power. No one. Hancock's poise, for the first time in years, completely shattered. Her finger trembled, her eye twitched. The carefully constructed mask of divine arrogance cracked, revealing a fissure of pure, unadulterated fury. This man was not just ignoring her, he was fundamentally broken. He was a flaw in the natural order of the world. Impossible, she whispered, her voice tight with rage. How are you not affected? Affected by what? Naruto asked, his simple honesty more infuriating than any insult. You just struck a pose. A nice one, he added, as if trying to be helpful. Very dramatic. That was the final straw. Hancock's face contorted into a mask of rage. Seize him, she shrieked, her voice losing its melodic quality and becoming a raw, commanding roar. He is an affront to my beauty. I want him executed. The Kuja warriors, jolted from their shock, sprang into action. They were an elite fighting force, each one a master of combat and a user of a strange, invisible power Naruto could now faintly sense. It was not chakra, but it coated their limbs and arrows with a formidable energy. The first wave came at him with spears. They were fast, their movements economical and deadly. To Naruto, it was like watching a dance in slow motion. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't even assume a fighting stance. As the first spear lunged for his chest, he took a single, fluid step to the side. His hand came up, not to block, but to gently cup the spearhead. He used the warrior's own momentum, redirecting the weapon with a simple turn of his wrist, sending her stumbling harmlessly past him. Another came from his left, and he simply leaned back, the spear tip grazing the air an inch from his face. He tapped the shaft of the spear with 2 fingers as it passed, a minute pulse of his OWN energy traveling up the wood and causing the warrior's hands to go numb, forcing her to drop it. More came, a flurry of attacks from all sides. Naruto moved between them like a leaf on the wind, a serene island in a sea of controlled violence. He never struck back, he merely guided, redirected, and disarmed. A kick aimed at his head was met with an open palm that caught the ankle, spun the attacker around, and set her down gently on the ground, dizzy and confused. An arrow fired from point-blank range was plucked from the air, its hockey-infused tip buzzing harmlessly against his fingertips. He wasn't fighting them. He was dismantling their assault with the casual ease of a grandmaster solving a child's puzzle. The Kuja, who had never known defeat on their home island, found themselves utterly neutralized. They weren't hurt, but they were disarmed, off balance, and completely ineffective. The pile of discarded spears and arrows around Naruto grew. Sandersonia and Marigold, Hancock's imposing sisters, finally had enough. With guttural roars, they entered the fray. They were different. Their bodies shifted, their hair transforming into snakes, their power level dwarfing that of the other warriors. Marigold spat a cloud of poison, which Naruto dispersed with a single, controlled puff of wind from his mouth. Sandersonia moved like a serpent, her body elongating as she tried to constrict him. her hockey-coated hair snakes lashing out like whips. Naruto's expression remained unchanged. He met Sandersonia's charge, his movements becoming sharper, more precise. He weaved through the lashing snake hair, his hands a blur as he slapped each one aside. He saw an opening, a flicker of a moment between attacks, and flowed inside her guard. Before she could react, he tapped 2 points on her shoulders and 1 on her back. Her body went rigid, her muscles locking up as her momentum carried her forward, and she toppled over like a felled statue, completely immobilized but unharmed. The entire clearing was now silent. The Kuja warriors stared at their defeated champions, then at the man standing calmly in the center of it all, not a single scratch on him, not even breathing heavily. Hancock was trembling, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. This wasn't just defiance. This was a complete invalidation of everything she was. Her beauty was useless. Her power was useless. The strength of her nation, the feared Kuja warriors, were useless. This man, this thing that had fallen from the sky, had undone her entire world without throwing a single punch. Rage, pure and absolute, burned away her shock. It was a familiar feeling, a comforting one. Rage had protected her before. Rage was her shield. You, she snarled, her voice dangerously low. She drew her own leg back, her body coiling with a power that dwarfed her sister's. The air crackled around her, hockey so dense it was almost visible. She saw herself not as a woman fighting a man, but as a goddess putting down a blasphemer. She channeled all her fury, all her humiliation, into a single, perfect attack. She launched herself forward, a blur of motion, her leg snapping out in a devastating kick. With a cry, she unleashed her signature technique. Perfume femur. From the tip of her boot, a beam of pink light shot forth, transforming into a solid, heart-tipped arrow of pure petrifying energy. It was her strongest, fastest attack, a projectile that combined her devil fruit power with her formidable hockey. It could pierce steel and turn a giant to stone in an instant. It flew through the air, a beautiful, deadly harbinger of her wrath. Naruto watched it come. He saw the energy it contained, the sheer force of will behind it. It was impressive. He respected it. He raised his right hand, his index and middle fingers extended. The arrow, an unstoppable force of nature that had defeated countless powerful pirates, met his 2 fingers. There was no explosion, no catastrophic impact. It simply stopped. The pink energy flickered and died, the hockey dissipating into nothingness. The arrow dissolved into harmless particles of light, leaving absolute silence in its wake. Naruto stood there, his arm extended, his expression unchanged, as if he had just caught a child's toy. He lowered his hand and looked at Hancock, his gaze not one of judgment or mockery, but of genuine, unwavering calm. "Are you finished?" he asked. Boa Hancock stood frozen, her legs still extended from the kick. Her perfect face was pale, her dark eyes wide with an emotion she hadn't truly felt since she was a terrified child in the hands of the celestial dragons. Utter, helpless, incomprehensible powerlessness. This man wasn't just strong. He operated on a plane of existence she couldn't begin to fathom. Her rage, which had been a roaring inferno moments before, was snuffed out, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar dread. And beneath that dread, buried deep, was a flicker of something else. Something she would never, ever admit to. Intrigue. A tense, unbearable stalemate settled over the clearing. The man from the sky had not attacked, had not threatened, had not even raised his voice. But with his quiet, effortless defense, he had conquered Amazon Lily more completely than any invading army ever could. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Stone. He was not a prisoner, yet he was not free. For 3 days, Naruto Uzumaki lived in a state of polite, heavily guarded limbo. The Kuja warriors, once openly hostile, now kept their distance, their eyes holding a mixture of profound fear and a grudging, confused respect. They would leave trays of food, exotic fruits, roasted sea creatures, and a surprisingly bland bread, at the entrance to the small, Spartan hut they had assigned him. They watched his every move, not as guards watching a captive, but as villagers observing a dormant volcano, praying it would not erupt. He spent his time exploring the island, or at least the parts they allowed him to see. He never pushed the boundaries, never challenged the silent perimeter of warriors that shadowed him. He walked through the impossibly large forests, sat by the shore watching the strange, monstrous creature's tea. Hat swam in the turquoise waters of the calm belt, and tried to meditate. He needed to understand this new world, to feel its energy, but it was like listening to a song in a language he didn't know. The natural energy was here, vibrant and wild, but it flowed in unfamiliar patterns. His sage mode felt sluggish, the connection taking longer to establish. It was like his body knew the steps to a dance, but the rhythm of the music was all wrong. Kurama was quiet, conserving his strength. This world feels thin, the great fox murmured in his mind, the first full sentence he'd managed since their violent arrival. The life force is strong on the surface, but the core of it is weak. Unstable, Naruto agreed. There was a constant, almost imperceptible hum of wrongness just beneath the surface of things. A dissonant note in the planet's symphony. It was the same cold, empty static he had felt just before the void had torn him from his home. Here, it was faint, a whisper in a hurricane, but it was present. And it was growing. On the fourth day, he received his first visitor. She was an old woman, incredibly short and wizened, with a snake-headed staff that seemed to serve more as a symbol of authority than a walking aid. She carried herself with an air of sharp, pragmatic intelligence that the other Kuja lacked. The warriors shadowing him immediately bowed to her. "So, you are the man who does not break," she said. Her voice raspy with age. She dismissed his guards with a flick of her wrist and sat down on a stone bench opposite him, her gaze sharp and analytical. "I am Gloriosa. They used to call me Elder Nyan. Naruto Uzumaki," he replied, giving a slight bow of his head. "It's nice to finally have someone to talk to. Do not mistake this for a social call," she snapped, though there was no real heat in it. "You have broken the laws of this island simply by being male. You have humiliated our empress and neutralized our strongest warriors without raising a sweat. By all rights, you should be a smear of stone dust on the forest floor. The only reason you are still breathing is because no one here has the first clue how to kill you." Naruto offered a small, wry smile. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just want to understand where I am and find a way home." "Home," Gloriosa grunted, tapping her staff on the stone. "From the sky," they said. "I am old, boy, but I am not senile. Men do not fall from the sky. Usually." "No," he admitted. "It was an accident." The old woman studied him, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She saw no malice in him, no ambition, no lust. It was this that she found most unsettling. He was a creature of immense power who seemed to desire nothing. "Hancock is in a rage," she stated plainly. "She has not left her palace since your arrival. You have presented her with a reality she cannot accept." "I didn't mean to," Naruto said honestly. "She attacked me. I defended myself." "Defended?" Gloriosa scoffed. "Boy, you did not defend. You made a mockery of her. You negated her entire existence with a flick of your wrist. To a woman like Hancock, that is a fate worse than death." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "You must understand, since she was a child, her power and her beauty have been the only weapons she has had to keep the world at bay. A world that has been exceptionally cruel to her. You rendered both meaningless." A pang of empathy resonated within Naruto. He knew what it was like to be defined by a single, overwhelming power, to have the world see you only as a weapon or a monster. He saw a flicker of a memory, a young girl with a brand on her back, weeping in a dark, gilded cage. The image was gone as quickly as it came, a stray thought, but it left an impression. "The world outside this island," Gloriosa continued, her gaze distant, "is ruled by men, cruel, greedy, monstrous men who believe they are gods. They are called celestial dragons. They take what they want, they destroy what they please, and the world bows to them. Hancock, and her sisters, have seen the very worst of what a man's power can do. Her hatred is not a whim, boy. It is a shield forged in the fires of hell." Naruto listened, his expression somber. The pieces began to click into place. The arrogance, the immediate aggression, the absolute belief in her own dominance, it was all a defense. A wall built to keep the horrors of her past from ever touching her again. He had not just walked through her shield, he had unknowingly tapped on the very scars it was meant to protect. "I see," he said quietly. "No, you don't," Gloriosa corrected him. "But you were the first man to ever look at her and not want something." That is a dangerous thing. More dangerous than any army. She stood, her joints creaking. Hancock will have to face you eventually. Be careful. A cornered snake is at its most venomous. With that cryptic warning, she left, leaving Naruto alone with a much clearer, and much sadder, picture of the beautiful, furious empress. Inside the opulent chambers of the Kuja Palace, Boa Hancock was a tempest of silk and fury. She had smashed priceless vases, torn tapestries from the walls, and kicked her pet snake, Salome, across the room twice. Her sisters, Sandersonia and Marigold, watched from a safe distance, their bodies still aching from the phantom pains of Naruto's nerve strikes. How? Hancock screamed, whirling to face them. Her eyes blazing. How is it possible? My beauty, my power, they are absolute. No man is immune. No one. Perhaps he is not truly a man, elder sister, Marigold offered timidly. Or perhaps he is simply a fool with no aesthetic sense. Sandersonia added. Fools can be turned to stone. Hancock retorted, pacing like a caged panther. Idiots, geniuses, cowards, heroes, they all succumb. But he just looked at me. She shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. It was the look that haunted her. The calm curiosity, the complete absence of awe or desire. It made her feel mundane. And to Boa Hancock, being mundane was the ultimate violation. She kept replaying the confrontation in her mind. His movements, so fluid and effortless. The way he'd neutralized her Eli Tay warriors without causing a single injury. The casual, almost lazy way he had stopped her perfume femur with 2 fingers. It wasn't the display of a brawler or a brute. It was the calm, precise economy of a master. So far beyond her that it defied comprehension. The men she knew, the ones from her nightmares, used their power to dominate, to crush, to inflict pain. It was a tool of their ego. This man, Naruto, used his power as a shield, not just for himself, but seemingly for his opponents as well. He had protected her own warriors from their own attacks. The concept was so alien it made her head spin. A part of her, a small, terrified part she kept buried beneath layers of arrogance, was deathly afraid of him. But another, larger part was consumed by a burning, obsessive need to understand. How could such a creature exist? What was he? The questions looped endlessly in her mind, fueling her rage and, to her immense disgust, her curiosity. She stopped her pacing and stared out of her balcony window, towards the distant hut where the strange man was being kept. He cannot be allowed to exist, she whispered to herself. He unravels everything. It was then that she felt it. A tremor, not in the earth, but in the air. A low, gut-wrenching vibration that made the hair on her arms stand up. Salome hissed, coiling nervously at her feet. On the horizon, the eternally calm waters of the calm belt began to churn. Naruto felt the disturbance grow from a whisper to a roar in his senses. The dark static he had been monitoring was coalescing, focusing its influence on a single point. In the deep waters south of the island. The natural energy of the area was being twisted into a knot of pure, agonizing rage. He rose to his feet, his eyes scanning the horizon. The birds had fallen silent. The forest was holding its breath. Kit, something is coming, Kurama warned, his own power stirring in response. Something big and very, very angry. A geyser of water erupted from the sea miles out. A plume that reached to the clouds. From the churning vortex, a head emerged. It was larger than a battleship, covered in thick, barnacle-encrusted green scales. Its eyes, each one the size of a house, burned with a malevolent crimson light. A colossal sea king, more ancient and vast than any of the creatures that normally patrolled the calm belt, had been awakened. And it was screaming a silent, psychic scream of pure, unadulterated fury. An alarm bell, a great bronze gong, began to toll in the Kuja village. Warriors swarmed towards the coastline, bows at the ready. Their faces were grim, but there was no panic. Only the steely resolve of a people accustomed to defending their home. Naruto moved, a blur of motion that left the stunned Kuja guards behind. He arrived at the port city. Just as the Sea King's full form became visible, its serpentine body was miles long, a living mountain of muscle and rage. It was headed directly for the city's harbor. Fire! A Kuja commander bellowed. 1,000 arrows arced into the sky, each one glowing with the invisible sheen of hockey. They struck the beast's head like a hailstorm of deadly needles. Most of them bounced harmlessly off its thick hide. The few that found purchase in the softer tissue around its eyes only seemed to enrage it further. It let out a deafening roar, a sound that shook the very foundations of the island, and opened its cavernous mouth. A sphere of pressurized water, crackling with raw energy, began to form within its jaws. From the palace balcony, Hancock watched, her own internal turmoil forgotten in the face of the immediate crisis. She knew what that attack could do. It would not just destroy the harbor, it would wipe the entire coastal city off the map. Useless, she snarled, preparing to leap into the fray herself. This was her island, her responsibility. But before she could move, a figure appeared on the pier below, walking calmly towards the water's edge. It was him, Naruto. Stand down. Naruto's voice was not a shout, but it carried with an unnatural clarity over the rising din, reaching every warrior on the battlements. Don't attack it, you're only making it worse. The warriors hesitated, looking from the man to the monster. The command in his voice was undeniable. Hancock, too, found herself frozen, watching, waiting. Naruto stopped at the end of the pier, the wind whipping his hair. The shadow of the colossal Sea King falling over him. He did not power up in a blaze of chakra. He did not form a jutsu. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were different. His pupils had elongated into the horizontal bars of a toad sage, but around them, a brilliant orange pigmentation flared to life. He drew upon the wild, untamed natural energy of this new world, forcing it to obey him, to flow through him. The power of the Six Paths Sage Mode surged to life. A golden aura, as bright and warm as the sun, enveloped him. Truth-seeking orbs, spheres of pure, malleable creation and destruction, materialized behind him in a perfect halo. He floated off the ground, a small, divine figure against the backdrop of a world-ending monster. The Kuja stared in stunned, reverent silence. Hancock's breath caught in her throat. The sheer scale of the power radiating from him was beyond anything she had ever imagined. It was calm, pure, and overwhelmingly absolute. It made an emperor's haki feel like a child's tantrum. But Naruto did not prepare an attack. He rose higher, flying towards the enraged beast, stopping a few hundred feet from its face. He raised a hand, palm open. He wasn't preparing to strike. He was reaching out. With his sage abilities, he pushed his consciousness past the beast's rage, past the mindless fury, and touched the source of its pain. He felt it, the cold, insidious whisper of the void. It was like a psychic parasite, latched onto the ancient creature's mind, feeding it paranoia, fear, and aggression, twisting its instinct to protect its territory into a compulsion to destroy everything. He could also feel its loneliness, the eons it had spent sleeping in the silent dark, and the sudden, terrifying agony of its awakening. Easy now, Naruto projected, not with words, but with pure feeling. He sent waves of tranquility, of the peace he had felt sitting atop the Hokage monument. He shared the warmth of the sun on his face, the comfort of a full belly. The feeling of sleeping soundly after a long day. He pushed back against the cold static of the void with the overwhelming power of simple, pure life. You're not alone. I'm here. Let it go. The Sea King paused, its charge faltering. The ball of destructive water in its mouth wavered and dissolved. Its crimson eyes, filled with mindless rage, flickered. It saw not a threat, but a warm, golden light. It felt not aggression, but an empathy that resonated deep in its ancient soul. The agonizing whispers in its mind began to fade, drowned out by a feeling of profound calm. The massive creature let out a low, mournful rumble. It was not a roar of anger, but a cry of release. The burning red in its eyes faded, returning to their natural, deep blue. Slowly, majestically, the ancient Sea King lowered its head, bowing to the small, golden figure floating before it. It held the pose for a long moment, a gesture of immense, primal respect, before it turned and, with a powerful swish of its tail, sank back into the silent depths from which it had come. The sea grew calm. The winds died down. Silence returned. Naruto floated in the air for a moment longer, the golden aura fading around him as he drifted back down to the pier. He looked out at the water, his brow furrowed in thought. The dark energy had retreated, but he had felt its nature more clearly this time. It was cold, patient, and utterly anathema to life. He turned, his senses telling him he was no longer alone on the pier. Boa Hancock stood 20 feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, her usual mask of arrogant superiority completely gone. Her face was a canvas of conflicting emotions: awe, disbelief, fear, and a raw, startling vulnerability. She looked at him not as a man, an intruder, or an enemy, but as a living paradox. A question she desperately needed an answer to. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely a whisper, stripped of its usual imperious tone and filled with a genuine, soul-deep confusion that shook her to her very core. "What?" she breathed, her dark eyes wide and fixed on him. "Are you?" Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Gilded Cage. The air on the pier hung thick with the unspoken question. Boa Hancock, the unshakable empress, stood stripped of her arrogance, her entire worldview fractured by the man before her. The godlike power, the impossible act of pacifying a creature that could shatter her island, and the calm, unwavering kindness in his eyes, it was a combination that her mind simply could not process. "What are you?" she asked again, her voice losing its breathy, whispered quality and gaining a sharp edge of demand. It was a desperate grasp for the familiar comfort of authority. Naruto's golden aura was gone, the truth-seeking orbs had vanished, and he was once again just a man in simple black clothing. Yet the afterimage of his power seemed to linger in the air. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, as if that explained everything. "And I'm not from around here." Hancock's eyes narrowed. "Do you take me for a fool? No man is from the sky." "It's not a lie," he said, his gaze steady. "Where I come from, the world is different. We don't have these vast oceans. The land is divided into nations, hidden villages, and our power, what you might call jutsu, comes from an energy called chakra. I was in a bad spot. Something pulled me from my world and dropped me into yours." His explanation was straightforward, delivered without any hint of deception. It was so fantastically unbelievable that it looped back around to being strangely plausible. Hancock stared at him, searching for any sign of a lie, any flicker of mockery. She found none. She was left with two choices. Either this man was a lunatic, or he was telling an impossible truth. A lunatic could not have done what he just did. Another world, she breathed, the concept settling in her mind like a lead weight. It was the only explanation that made any sense. It explained his immunity to her power, his ignorance of the world's structure, and the nature of his abilities, which felt nothing like hockey or any devil fruit she had ever encountered. Before their conversation could continue, Elder Nyan hobbled onto the pier. Her expression grim. "Hancock-sama," she said, bowing stiffly. "A government ship approaches. They carry a summons. A mandatory meeting of the 7 warlords is to be held in Mary Geoise." Hancock's head snapped towards the horizon. A ship bearing the gull insignia of the world government was indeed cutting through the calm waters. Her expression soured instantly. Mary Geoise, the Holy Land, the gilded cage where her nightmares were born. The last place in the world she ever wanted to set foot again. But a summons was absolute. To refuse was to have her warlord status revoked. Leaving Amazon Lily vulnerable, an idea, sharp and dangerous, began to form in her mind. Her eyes flickered from the approaching ship back to Naruto. He was an anomaly, a being of incomprehensible power who knew nothing of this world. She was being summoned to the heart of her enemy's power. It was a perfect, terrible confluence of events. "I will attend," she declared, her voice regaining its imperious chill. She turned her gaze fully on Naruto, a calculated, predatory gleam in her eyes. "And you will accompany me?" Naruto raised an eyebrow. "You want me to come with you? I thought you wanted me executed." "Do not presume to understand my intentions," she snapped, the familiar mask of arrogance sliding back into place, a welcome shield for her roiling thoughts. "You are a mystery. I cannot leave a being of your power unattended on my island. Therefore, you will come with me as my attendant. You will be silent, you will be obedient, and you will learn your place." It was a flimsy pretext. And they both knew it. She wanted him close. She needed to keep this impossible force of nature where she could see him, to understand him, perhaps even to wield him if necessary. For Naruto, it was a perfect opportunity. He needed information. He needed to understand the powers that governed this world if he was ever to find a way back. The heart of that power seemed like the best place to start. All right, he agreed easily. I'll come. His quick acceptance seemed to annoy her more than any argument would have. With a flick of her hair, she turned and strode back towards the city, shouting orders to prepare her ship, the perfume Yuta. Naruto watched her go, a small smile playing on his lips. Beneath all that fire and pride, he could sense her turmoil. She was a gilded fortress, beautiful and intimidating, but the foundations were riddled with cracks. The journey to marry Geoise was a study in contrasts. The perfume Yuta, a massive ship drawn by two colossal, hooded sea serpents, cut through the water with an unnatural speed and silence. On its deck, the Kuja warriors trained relentlessly, their battle cries sharp and focused. Hancock remained in her lavish quarters, secluded and remote, issuing commands through her sisters. Naruto, true to his word, was a quiet observer. He watched the Kuja, learning their fighting styles. He stared at the sea, Ying to parse the flow of this world's natural energy. He sensed the strange, oppressive calm of the sea belts they passed through, a dead zone for the normal winds and currents of the ocean. As they approached the Great Red Line, the colossal continent that circled the globe, the mood on the ship grew tense. They docked at the base, and from there, they had to take a strange, bubble-based lift sigh. Stem up the impossible cliff face to the holy land of Mary Geoise. The moment Naruto stepped onto the sacred soil, he felt it. An overwhelming sense of manufactured order, of oppressive authority. The grass was too green. The sky was too blue, the marble buildings gleamed with a sterile, arrogant perfection. But beneath it all was the stench of fear. The servants and commoners who scurried through the streets kept their heads bowed, their eyes fixed on the ground, terrified of accidentally making eye contact with one of the figures who strolled through the city with an air of absolute ownership. The world nobles, the celestial dragons. Naruto saw them from a distance, absurd figures in bubble helmets, their faces twisted into expressions of bored, casual cruelty. They treated the people around them as less than insects. Their every whim a divine law. A cold anger, the likes of which he hadn't felt since the war, began to simmer deep within him. This place was a monument to the very arrogance and abuse of power he had fought his entire life to dismantle. Hancock was a different person here. The confident, domineering empress was gone. Her body was rigid, her face a pale, emotionless mask. She walked with a stiff, forced grace, her eyes focused straight ahead, deliberately seeing nothing. Naruto walked a half-step behind her, his senses flared, cataloging every threat, every hostile intent. He could feel her fear, a frantic, hummingbird-like tremor beneath her icy facade. They were escorted to a grand hall where the other warlords were gathering. Naruto's presence immediately drew every eye. He was an unknown variable in a room full of established predators. A man with a feathered pink coat and a wicked, permanent grin was the first to speak, his voice dripping with condescending amusement. Foo. Well now, Hancock, who is this handsome pet you've brought with you? I didn't think you were fond of men. Another figure, a man with eyes like a hawk and a massive, cross-shaped sword on his back, merely watched, his gaze sharp and piercing. He said nothing, but Naruto could feel the man's focus on him, a silent weighing of his strength. It was the gaze of a true warrior, and Naruto met it with a calm, respectful nod. Hancock bristled. Mind your own affairs, Doflamingo. He is a new addition to my crew. Is he now? Doflamingo purred, taking a step closer. His eyes, hidden behind his bizarre sunglasses, seemed to bore into Naruto. He doesn't look like much. No fire in him. What can you do, pet? Naruto didn't rise to the bait. I can listen, he said, his voice even. It's amazing what you can learn when you're not the one talking. Doflamingo's grin widened, a flash of genuine, dangerous interest in his eyes. The hawk-eyed man, Dracula Mahawk, a flicker of a smirk to cross his lips. This newcomer was not easily rattled. The tense atmosphere of the room was broken by a commotion from the street outside, a collective gasp of terror from the assembled crowd. Through the grand doorway, they saw the source. A celestial dragon, Saint Charlos, a particularly odious-looking man with a perpetually runny nose and a vacant, cruel expression, had stopped a procession of servants. His gaze had fallen on a young nurse who had been tending to one of his own injured guards. That one, Charlos declared, his voice a petulant whine, pointing a fat finger at the terrified woman. I am bored of my current slaves. Her face pleases me. She will be my new wife. Fetch her. The world froze. The woman's face went white with terror. Her companions looked at the ground, trembling. The nearby Marine guards, sworn to protect the innocent, simply turned their gaze away, their faces set in grim resignation. This was the law of the world. What a god wants, a god gets. Hancock went rigid, a choked sound caught in her throat. Naruto saw her hands clench, her knuckles white. Her eyes were wide with a terror that was not for the nurse, but for herself. She was reliving it. The pointing finger, the casual declaration of ownership, the absolute helplessness. Saint Charlos's bodyguards moved to grab the weeping nurse. And then, Naruto was there. He hadn't. He moved with a burst of speed that tore up the ground. He had simply ceased to be in the hall and appeared on the street, standing between the guards and the woman. There was no sound, no gust of wind. Just a sudden, impossible relocation. The warlords in the hall stared. Doflamingo's grin vanished, replaced by open-mouthed shock. Mihawk's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword. Hancock's heart hammered against her ribs. Saint Charlos blinked, his simple mind slow to process this defiance. Who are you? He whined. Move. You are in the way of my property. She's not property, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. The simmering anger had risen to the surface, not as a hot rage, but as a focused, glacial calm. She's a person, and you're not going to touch her. Charlos's face turned purple with indignation. Do you know who I am? I am a celestial dragon. I am a god of this world. To defy me is to defy the world. An admiral will be called. You will be executed. He drew a golden, jewel-encrusted pistol, his hand trembling with fury, and aimed it at Naruto's head. I will kill you myself, you insolent commoner. Naruto didn't even look at the gun. He looked at the man. And in that moment, he unleashed a minuscule, infinitesimally small fraction of the pressure he had once directed at the enemies of his world. It wasn't conqueror's haki, it was the pure, undilute, spiritual presence of a being who had befriended demigods and stared down the creator of his universe. Saint Charlos froze. The gun suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The air in his lungs turned to ice. His brain, cushioned his entire life by absolute privilege, could not process the sheer, overwhelming weight of the presence before him. This wasn't a commoner. This was a predator of a kind he had never known existed. His bubble helmet didn't protect him. His status didn't protect him. He was a frightened child standing before a silent god. Then, Naruto acted. His hand moved in a blur, not to strike, but to flick Charlos's forehead with 2 fingers. It was a gentle tap, carrying almost no physical force. But it was infused with a precise pulse of his unique energy. Pop! The bubble helmet that surrounded Charlos's head vanished. The sophisticated mechanism that supplied his filtered air instantly disabled. The celestial dragon gasped, breathing the unclean air of the common world for the first time in his life. But that wasn't all. The intricate, ridiculous layers of his noble garments seemed to lose their structural integrity. Threads unraveled, buckles unfastened, and with a soft swoosh, the entire opulent ensemble collapsed around his ankles, leaving him standing in the middle of the Holy Land in nothing but his polka-dotted undergarments. A deathly silence fell over Mary Geoise. The crowd stared, their terror momentarily forgotten, replaced by sheer, unadulterated disbelief. The Marine guards were paralyzed, their training giving them no protocol for this situation. In the Warlord Hall, Doflamingo let out a choked sound that might have been a laugh. Naruto paid them no mind. He looked down at the spluttering, humiliated world noble and spoke, his voice cold and clear. You're not a god, you're just a man in a fancy suit. And without it, you're nothing. It was at that moment that Naruto felt the gaze. The cold spot. He scanned the crowd, and his eyes locked with a man standing near a fountain. He was impeccably dressed in a simple, dark suit, his face utterly forgettable, his posture relaxed. He could have been a low-level bureaucrat or a government agent. But his eyes were voids. They held no light, no emotion, no life. They were pits of absolute nothingness, and they were fixed on Naruto with a cold, analytical intensity. It was the avatar of the silent entropy. The whisper that had haunted him since he arrived. The man gave a nearly imperceptible nod, a chilling acknowledgement, before he turned and melted into the crowd, vanishing from sight and from Naruto's senses, leaving behind a lingering cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. A shadow fell over the scene. Well now, that's quite a mess you've made. Naruto turned. An impossibly tall man in a yellow striped suit stood there, his hands in his pockets, a lazy, detached expression on his face. Admiral Kizaru. The light itself seemed to bend around him. Punching a celestial dragon. That's a declaration of war, you knew. The tension snapped back, 1,000 times stronger than before. The crowd began to flee in panic. But before Kizaru could act, before the world could descend into chaos, Hancock found her voice. She strode from the hall, her body moving with a fluid grace she hadn't possessed since arriving. The fear was gone, burned away by the incandescent image of what she had just witnessed. He had done it. He had done what she had only dreamed of in her darkest, most vengeful fantasies. He had humbled a god. She stopped beside Naruto, placing herself between him and the admiral. A gesture of shocking, suicidal protectiveness. Her chin was high, her voice ringing with an authority that was no longer a facade, but a deeply felt conviction. He has done nothing, Admiral, she declared, her voice echoing through the silent plaza. This man is Naruto Uzumaki, a member of my Kuja pirates. His actions are my actions. As a warlord of the sea, I was merely disciplining this area. This man's unkempt appearance was an affront to the beauty of Mary Geoise. She glanced at the half-naked, whimpering Charlos with utter disgust. An offense which has now been rectified. It was a brilliant, audacious lie, one that gave the world government an out, however flimsy. Kizaru looked from the humiliated celestial dragon to the defiant pirate empress and her mysterious companion. He sighed, a theatrical sound of pure boredom. This was becoming far too much paperwork. Hancock didn't wait for his response. She looked at Naruto, her dark eyes blazing with an intensity he had never seen before. It was a maelstrom of emotions, gratitude, awe, terror, and something fierce, something possessive. She made her choice. Here, in the heart of her own personal hell. She drew her line in the sand. He is under my protection, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the plaza, a direct challenge to the admiral and the world itself. Quote, any action taken against him is an act of war against the Kuja nation. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Serpentine Waltz. The retreat from Mary Geoise was not a retreat. It was a declaration. As the perfume Yuta pulled away from the red line, leaving the Holy Land a pristine, white scar on the horizon, a new and volatile energy crackled through the ship. Hancock's audacious claim of protection, her public defiance in the face of an admiral, had transformed Naruto from a mysterious anomaly into a symbol. To her crew, he was now a banner their empress had chosen to raise, and they would defend him with their lives. Even if they didn't understand why. Hancock herself was a storm contained in a porcelain vessel. She had locked herself away in her chambers, the grandest suite at the ship's stern, immediately upon boarding. She needed solitude. The events in the Holy Land played over and over in her mind, a chaotic reel of images and emotions. She saw the sneering, pig-like face of St. Charlos, his fat finger pointing, and felt the old, cold terror wash over her, a phantom chill that never truly left her bones. But that image was immediately immolated by the next, Naruto, appearing like a silent judgment. His voice calm and lethal, his power a quiet, absolute thing that didn't roar but simply was. He had not struck the celestial dragon. He had not brutalized him. He had stripped him. He had peeled back the layers of divine right, of inherited power, of opulent clothing, and revealed the pathetic, whimpering creature beneath. He had humiliated a god, and in doing so, had done more to heal a wound inside her than 1,000 years of vengeance ever could. The sheer, intoxicating catharsis of that moment was a feeling so potent it frightened her. And then she had acted. Her body moved before her mind had caught up, her voice ringing out in his defense. She had placed herself, her throne, and her entire nation between him and the full might of the world government. It was the single most reckless, illogical, and emotionally honest thing she had ever done. Her hatred of men was a creed, a pillar of her identity. Yet, she had just gambled everything for one. The contradiction. was so profound it left her feeling dizzy and nauseous. She paced her chambers, the silk of her gown whispering against the fine carpets, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She was terrified of what she had done. And she was utterly, terrifyingly exhilarated. Naruto, for his part, gave her the space she needed. He stood at the prow of the ship, his hands tucked in his pockets, the sea breeze a cool, steady presence. The Kuja warriors kept a respectful distance, their previous fear now mingled with a fierce, protective curiosity. He was the man their queen had defended. He was, by extension, one of them. He could feel their gazes on him, the whispers that followed him. He ignored them, his mind focused on something else entirely. The man in the suit. The agent from the crowd. His eyes had been windows into nothing. The same chilling emptiness as the void that had brought him here. It was the first tangible clue he'd had, the first sign that the force that displaced him was not a random, natural phenomenon. It was an intelligence. It was watching him. That thing was not human. Kurama rumbled in his mind, the fox's senses as sharp as ever. It had no life force. No scent. It as like a hole in the world wearing a man's skin. I know, Naruto thought back, his eyes scanning the endless expanse of blue water. It wasn't there to interfere. It was observing, gauging. Gauging what? Your strength. My nature. Naruto corrected. It wanted to see what I would do. That celestial dragon. It was a test. A baited trap. And Naruto had walked right into it, not out of ignorance, but out of conviction. He would not have changed a single action. He had seen injustice and he had corrected it. That was the core of who he was. But the incident revealed a chilling truth. His enemy was not just a mindless force. It was strategic. It was patient. And it was now aware of his presence in this world. The stakes had just been raised from a personal quest to get home to something far more sinister. The tense quiet on the ship lasted for 2 days. Hancock remained secluded. Naruto kept his vigil at the prow. On the 3rd day, the empress emerged. She was dressed not in one of her flowing, regal gowns, but in the practical, combat-ready attire of her Kuja warriors, albeit a more ornate version. Her long black hair was tied back, and her expression was one of cool, unreadable neutrality. She strode onto the main deck where Naruto was watching the 2 great Yuta serpents pull their vessel, and the crew immediately fell silent, sensing a shift in the wind. She stopped before him, her gaze direct and challenging. "You move well," she stated, not a compliment but a clinical observation. "But you fight like a pacifist. You disarm, you redirect, you disable. You refuse to injure. In the grand line, that is a weakness that will get you killed." Naruto turned to face her fully. "Where I come from, we call it control. There's no honor in using a mountain to crush an ant." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "This world is full of mountains. And they will not hesitate to crush you. Your power is immense, but it is undisciplined. Untested by the true nature of this sea." She pointed a single, elegant finger at the center of the deck. "Spar with me. No holding back. Show me what the man who humbled a god can truly do." It was a challenge, but it was also something more. It was a bridge, a way for them to interact in the only language she had ever truly trusted, the language of combat. Naruto's lips curved into a small smile. "All right, but if I win, you have to answer some of my questions about this world. No secrets." Her eyes flashed. "A wager. You are confident. Very well. But if I win," she said, her voice dropping to a silken threat, "you will explain to me, in detail, exactly what you are." He simply nodded. "Deal." The Kuja crew scrambled to clear the deck, forming a wide circle. This was more than a simple sparring match. It was a clash of worlds, a confrontation that had been brewing since the moment he'd opened his eyes on their island. Sandersonia and Marigold stood at the edge of the circle, their expressions a mixture of anxiety for their sister and a morbid curiosity to see the man's power up close once more. Hancock settled into her stance, a fluid, serpent-like grace in her posture. The air around her grew heavy, crackling with the invisible force of her haki. It was a potent, suffocating pressure, the aura of a true conqueror, designed to crush the will of her opponents before the fight even began. It washed over Naruto, and he met it with the placid calm of a deep lake. Her haki was a storm on the surface, but his spirit was the entire ocean, and it remained unmoved. "Begin," she commanded. She didn't wait for him to respond. She exploded forward, a blur of red and gold, her legs scything through the air in a kick aimed at his head. It was faster, sharper than her attacks on the island. This was not a goddess trying to awe a mortal. This was a warrior trying to defeat an equal. Naruto didn't retreat. He flowed with her, his body moving with an almost lazy grace. He raised an arm, his open palm meeting her ankle. He didn't block the force, he absorbed it. His joints and muscles flexing, and redirected it, spinning her around and using her own momentum to send her stumbling away. She recovered instantly, landing on her feet and launching back at him with a furious barrage of kicks and hand strikes, each one coated in the hard, invisible armor of her haki. It was like being attacked by a storm of beautiful, deadly hammers. "Slave arrow," she shouted, kissing her fingers to form a heart and pulling back, creating a bow of pink energy. A volley of heart-shaped projectiles, each one a deadly, petrifying missile, shot towards him. Naruto moved through the volley like a ghost. He weaved and ducked, the arrows missing him by millimeters. He didn't need to see them. His Sage mode, which he had activated in the instant the spar began, allowed him to feel the intent behind them, the subtle shifts in the air they created. He plucked one from the air, spinning it on his fingertip like a toy before dissolving it into harmless light. "Is that all?" he asked, his voice calm. Her response was a guttural snarl of frustration. She was using techniques that had leveled pirate crews and defeated giants, and he was treating it like a game. The humiliation of their first encounter began to bubble to the surface. She wouldn't let him make a mockery of her again. "You have seen nothing," she roared. She leapt into the air, her body coiling, and came down at him with a devastating axe kick. Perfume femur. The same attack he had stopped with 2 fingers. This time, however, it was infused with an even greater concentration of haki. A desperate attempt to overwhelm him with sheer force. Naruto met the attack. This time, he didn't just stop it. As her heel descended, he met it with the sole of his own foot. There was a sharp crack as their haki-infused attacks met, a shockwave of pure energy that rocked the entire ship and sent ripples across the calm sea. The Kuja warriors gasped, bracing themselves. They were locked, foot to foot. A perfect stalemate, but Naruto wasn't pushing back. He was just holding. Her full, furious power was crashing against an immovable object. "Your strength is impressive," he said, his voice as steady as if they were having a casual conversation. "But it's unfocused. You let your anger drive you, and it makes your power spray out in all directions. You're fighting the air as much as you're fighting me." With a sudden, precise application of pressure, he broke the stalemate, twisting his foot and deflecting her leg, throwing her off balance. He flowed forward, inside her guard. His hands became a blur. But he didn't strike. He tapped. A light touch to her shoulder, correcting her posture. A nudge to her hip, adjusting her center of gravity. A tap to the back of her knee, forcing her to shift her stance. "Your haki is like a shield," he explained, his movements perfectly synchronized with his words, forcing her into a defensive dance. "But you're holding it at arm's length. You need to pull it in. Make it a part of you. Not a shell, but a second skin." Hancock was stunned. He wasn't just fighting her, he was teaching her. In the middle of their wagered duel, he was giving her instruction. He moved around her, a whirlwind of calm control, his every touch, every block, every parry forcing her to move more efficiently, to focus her haki in ways she had never considered. She was the one on the defensive, being led through a violent, breathtakingly intimate waltz. Her rage began to recede, replaced by a profound, grudging respect. No one had ever dared. No one had ever been able to. She broke away, breathing heavily, her mind racing. He was right. She could feel the difference. Her power, usually a wild, outward explosion, was beginning to feel more centered, more controlled. She looked at him, not as an opponent, but as a puzzle she desperately wanted to solve. "Again," she said, her voice low and determined. The spar continued for nearly an hour. It was a dance of discovery. She showed him the raw power of haki and the strange, reality-bending nature of devil fruits. He, in turn, showed her the sublime control of Sage mode and the deep, philosophical art of a shinobi's taijutsu. They learned each other's rhythms, the feints, the tells, the moments of hesitation and the bursts of conviction. The Kuja warriors watched in spellbound silence, witnessing not a fight for dominance, but a conversation between two masters of their craft. Finally, panting and drenched in sweat, Hancock stopped. She was not defeated, but she knew she could not win. She could unleash her full power, petrify the entire deck, but she knew, with an absolute certainty, that it would not touch him. He was operating on a level she was only now beginning to perceive. "I concede," she said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. It was the first time she had ever uttered them. "You win the wager." Naruto relaxed his stance, the faint orange markings of his sage mode receding from his eyes. "It wasn't about winning," he said. "It was about understanding." Later that night, the sea was a calm sheet of black glass reflecting a sky littered with unfamiliar stars. A cool breeze, carrying the scent of salt and distance, swept across the deck. Hancock stood alone by the railing, staring out into the darkness, her arms crossed, her mind still replaying the spar. The memory of his hands guiding her, correcting her, was a phantom touch she could still feel on her skin. It was maddening. It was intriguing. She heard soft footsteps behind her and didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You came to collect on your wager," she said, her voice flat. "I came to talk," Naruto replied, stopping a respectful distance away. He leaned against the railing beside her, following her gaze to the stars. "That was a good fight. You're incredibly strong." The simple, honest praise caught her off guard. She wasn't used to praise that wasn't fawning adoration. "I lost," she stated. The fact still a bitter pill. "You learned," he corrected gently. "That's better than winning." He was silent for a moment before speaking again. "In my world, there were people like me. Not many. We were called Jinchuriki. We had great beasts of pure chakra sealed inside of us when we were babies. It gave us immense power, but it also made us targets. Weapons to be feared and controlled." Hancock turned her head slightly, her dark eyes watching him. She said nothing, but she was listening, her full attention on him. "For most of my childhood," Naruto continued, his voice quiet, "I was alone. The villagers, they didn't see a boy. They saw the monster sealed inside me. They hated me for it, feared me for it. I was an outcast. Power doesn't always bring you friends. Sometimes, it just builds a higher wall around your heart." A chord resonated deep within Hancock, a painful, familiar note. A weapon to be feared and controlled. A wall around the heart. She knew those feelings intimately. "They marked you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Naruto looked at her, surprised by her perception. "How did you know?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her back to him, a gesture of profound, shocking vulnerability. With a trembling hand, she reached for the clasp of her top. "Because," she said, her voice thick with a pain that was centuries old, "so was I." She pulled the fabric aside, revealing the smooth, pale skin of her back. And branded into it, a symbol of eternal shame and subjugation, was the hoof of the soaring dragon, the mark of a celestial dragon's slave. Naruto's breath caught. He saw it not just as a brand, but as a seal, a curse mark of ownership that had been burned not just into her skin, but into her very soul. He finally understood. The arrogance, the hatred of men, the absolute need for control, it was all a desperate, lifelong battle against this single, searing mark. He felt a surge of empathy so powerful it was almost painful, followed by a cold, murderous rage directed at the faceless monsters who had done this to her. He didn't speak. He didn't offer pity or apologies. He simply stood there, a silent, powerful witness to her deepest shame. He recognized her pain, not as a weakness, but as a source of the very strength she now wielded. By showing him the brand, she had given him a piece of her broken soul. And in his silent, non-judgmental acceptance, he was helping her hold it. It was in that quiet, shared moment of profound understanding that the lookout's cry shattered the night. Ships on the horizon, marine flags, they're moving to intercept. Hancock stiffened, quickly covering her back. The vulnerable moment was gone, replaced by the familiar mask of the warrior queen. "How many?" she demanded, her voice once again sharp as steel. "A full fleet. At least 10 vessels. It's Vice Admiral Onagumo." Hancock's face hardened. Onagumo was a bulldog, a relentless follower of what he called absolute justice. He wouldn't be here to talk. The Mary Geoise incident was having its fallout. To your stations, she commanded, her voice ringing across the ship. Prepare for battle. As the Kuja warriors swarmed the decks, knocking hockey-infused arrows and preparing their defenses, Hancock turned to Naruto. The intimacy of their earlier conversation still hung in the air between them. They are here for you, she said. Then let me handle it, he replied, his gaze fixed on the approaching lights of the Marine fleet. No one has to get hurt. This is my ship, she countered, her eyes blazing with a fierce, protective fire. This is my crew. You are under my protection. We will handle this together. As the first cannonballs began to arc across the dark water, Naruto looked at the Empress, who now stood red. Why for battle not just as a queen defending her territory, but as a woman defending a person she had, against all odds, chosen to trust. He allowed a true, brilliant smile to grace his features. Together, he agreed. The battle was swift and brutally one-sided. The Marine fleet, confident in its numbers and the reputation of its vice admiral, launched a full-scale barrage. Cannonballs screamed through the air, aimed to cripple and board. It was a futile effort. Hancock was a whirlwind of motion on her deck, a beautiful, deadly commander. Slave arrow, she would cry, and a rain of petrifying hearts would intercept a volley of cannonballs, turning them to stone in midair where they crashed harmlessly into the sea. Her sisters, Sandersonia and Marigold, guarded the flanks, their combined strength a formidable wall. But the true shield of the perfume Yuta was Naruto. He stood at the prow of the ship, a calm, immovable object in the face of the storm. As a volley of cannonballs descended, he simply held up a hand. A swirling, miniature hurricane of pure blue chakra appeared in his palm. Rasengan. The sphere of power didn't explode. It absorbed. The cannonballs that struck it were disintegrated, their kinetic energy completely nullified. He used wind-style jutsu to create massive gusts of air that acted as invisible walls, sending entire volleys of ammunition careening off course. On the lead marine vessel, Vice Admiral Onagumo, a grim-faced man with 6 spider-like arms protruding from his back, watched in disbelief. What is that man? He snarled. He's neutralizing our entire assault single-handedly. Deciding a direct approach was necessary, Onagumo launched himself from his ship, using the Rokushiki, Geppo, technique to kick off the air itself, rocketing towards the Kuja ship like a human cannonball. He was aiming for the Empress's sisters, hoping to create a chaotic opening. Rankyaku, he roared, his legs becoming blades that sent scythes of compressed air flying. Sandersonia and Marigold braced for the impact, but it never came. In a flash of yellow so fast it was barely perceptible, Naruto was there, standing before them. He hadn't moved, so much as he had simply arrived. The 6-path sage mode flared to life for a single, breathtaking instant, his eyes flashing gold, the truth-seeking orbs materializing behind him to form an absolute defense. Mo's powerful air scythes dissipated harmlessly against the black shield. The Vice Admiral landed on the ship's railing, his 6 arms, each wielding a saber, ready for battle. He stared at the man who had just effortlessly blocked his attack. He saw the golden eyes, felt the calm, bottomless well of power, and for the first time in his long, decorated career, he felt a sliver of genuine fear. Naruto didn't even look at him. He glanced back at Sandersonia and Marigold. You two all right? They could only nod, their eyes wide with awe. The battle was over. The Marine fleet was outmaneuvered and completely outclassed. Their primary weapon, artillery, was useless. Their strongest fighter was stonewalled. With a final, frustrated roar, Onagumo ordered the retreat, his pride in tatters. As the Marine ships turned, leaving the Kuja pirates victorious in the dark water, a cheer went up from the crew. They had faced a Marine fleet and won without taking a single casualty. They mobbed their Empress, celebrating their victory. In the midst of the celebration, Hancock's eyes found Naruto. He was standing alone at the prow again, his power faded, watching the last of the enemy ships disappear. The adrenaline of the battle was wearing off, leaving behind a raw, trembling awareness of what had just happened. He had protected her sisters. He had shielded her ship. He had stood with her, together. She walked towards him, her crew parting before her. The cheers died down as they watched their queen approach the strange, powerful man. He turned as she neared, his expression calm and reassuring. She stopped in front of him. The silence of the vast ocean stretching between them. The words wouldn't come. Thank you. I was scared. I'm glad you're here. They all felt small and inadequate. The wall she had spent a lifetime building around her heart had been irrevocably breached, not by force, but by a quiet, unwavering acceptance. Without thinking, without conscious thought, her hand rose. She reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, and took his. Naruto's hand was warm and calloused, a warrior's hand. He didn't pull away, he didn't question it, his fingers simply closed around hers, his grip firm and steady. It was not a kiss. It was not a declaration of love. It was a simple, profound point of contact. An anchor in the storm of her life. An acknowledgement of a bond that had been forged in the crucible of combat, trauma, and a strange, shared solitude. For the first time since she was a child, Boa Hancock felt, in the truest sense of the word, safe. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Sunken God. The aftermath of the battle left a strange calm in its wake. The Kuja warriors, once wary of Naruto, now treated him with a reverence that bordered on worship. They would bring him offerings of the best fruits, the finest silks, and ask for his opinion on everything from the ship's course to the sharpness of their arrows. He handled it with a polite, slightly awkward grace, deflecting their praise and trying to explain that he was just a man. It was a claim none of them believed. Boa Hancock watched it all with a complex mix of emotions. A fierce pride swelled in her chest whenever she saw her crew's adoration for him. It validated her choice, her public declaration in Mary Geoise. He was worthy of their respect. But a sharp, possessive jealousy would follow close behind. He was hers, her discovery, her responsibility, her something. The word hovered in her mind, unspoken and terrifying. Their dynamic had shifted. The fragile truce, the wagered spar, had given way to an easy, unspoken partnership. They would spend hours on the deck, not always talking, but simply existing in the same space. She would tell him stories of the Grand Line, of the strange islands and monstrous creatures, of the four emperors and the balance of power that governed the seas. In turn, he spoke of his world, of chakra and jutsu, of tailed beasts and lifelong rivalries. He described his village, Konoha, with a deep, aching fondness that made her feel a pang of something akin to envy. He had a home to miss. Her home was a fortress she had built to keep the world out. During these conversations, Naruto would often fall silent. His eyes closed, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was listening, not to her, but to the world itself. The faint, cold static he had felt since his arrival was becoming stronger. A dissonant hum on the edge of his senses. After the confrontation with the Marine fleet, he had a thread to follow. He could still feel the faint, lingering signature of the Void's energy that had been clinging to the enraged Sea King. It was a trail of breadcrumbs leading them deeper into the Grand Line. "It's close," he murmured one afternoon, his eyes snapping open. He was pointing towards the deep blue water ahead, and it's strong, stronger than before. Whatever it is, it's down there. Deep. Hancock followed his gaze. The sea here was a darker shade of blue, indicating an abyssal depth. They were approaching the red line again, preparing to descend towards Fishman Island. "The sea floor is thousands of meters below us. Nothing can survive that pressure." "We can," Naruto said with a quiet confidence. He walked to the edge of the ship, beckoning her to follow. "I need you to come with me. You're Haki. You can sense things I can't. You feel the will, the spirit of things. I feel their energy. We'll need both." Trusting him was becoming a reflex. She simply nodded, calling for a small, submersible-like scouting vessel to be prepared. "We won't need it," Naruto said. He held out a hand to her. "Just stay close to me." Before she could question him, he placed a hand on the ship's railing. A brilliant, golden chakra, the same divine energy she'd seen him use against the Sea King, flared to life around him. It didn't erupt. It flowed, molding itself into a perfect, translucent sphere that enveloped them both. The air inside was warm and breathable. Through the shimmering golden wall, the world outside was muted but perfectly clear. With a gentle push, the sphere detached from the ship and began to sink beneath the waves, the Kuja crew watching from the railing with wide, stunned eyes. The descent was mesmerizing. Sunlight filtered down through the water, creating shifting, ethereal beams of light. Strange, beautifully colored fish swam past their golden bubble, their scales iridescent. As they went deeper, the light faded, and the world outside became a realm of crushing darkness, populated by monstrous, bioluminescent creatures that glowed with an eerie, predatory light. The pressure outside the sphere must have been immense, enough to crumple a warship like paper, yet inside, it was as calm and still as a summer evening. Hancock stood beside him, her initial apprehension giving way to a sense of profound wonder. She was closer to him than she had ever been, the small space of the sphere creating an undeniable intimacy. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, the steady, thrumming hum of his power. It felt like standing next to a star. "Down there," Naruto said, his voice a low rumble. He pointed into the abyss below. A faint, sickly purple light was beginning to pulse in the crushing darkness, a beacon of corruption in the deep. As they drew closer, a shape began to resolve itself from the gloom. It was a city, a sunken, ancient metropolis of impossible architecture. Towers of black, basalt-like stone twisted towards them like grasping claws, carved with geometric patterns that seemed to hurt the eyes. There were no sharp edges. Everything was curved, organic, as if the city had been grown rather than built. It was beautiful and utterly terrifying. A cold seeped through Naruto's chakra sphere, a psychic sea. Hill that had nothing to do with the water temperature. Whispers echoed in the silence, formless and filled with ancient despair. "It feels dead," Kurama muttered. "No, worse than dead. It feels erased." Naruto felt it too. This city had once been teeming with life, with a powerful, unfamiliar energy. Now, all that remained were echoes, ghosts of a power that had been hollowed out and filled with the cold static of the void. In the center of the city, in a vast, open plaza, the purple light pulsed with a sickening rhythm. It emanated from a colossal statue of a being with 100 arms, its face a mask of serene contemplation. But the serenity was a lie. Dark, shadowy tendrils of energy, like solidified oil, clung to the statue, pulsing with the light. And kneeling before it was a figure. It was massive, easily the size of a giant, but its form was unstable, constantly shifting. It seemed to be made of the abyssal water itself, held together by sheer force of will, its body a swirling vortex of shadow and glowing purple corruption. It had a vaguely humanoid shape, but its limbs were too long, its movements pained and erratic. It radiated an aura of immense, ancient sorrow, a loneliness so profound it was a physical force. This was the source of the power, the second, stronger avatar of the void. As their sphere drifted into the plaza, the being's head snapped up. It had no face, only two burning, purple voids that fixed on them with an expression of pure, agonized rage. It let out a silent scream that tore through the water, a shockwave of psychic pain that buckled the wall of Naruto's chakra sphere. Hancock staggered, clutching her head, the scream of a billion dying souls echoing in her mind. "What is that thing?" she gasped. "A guardian," Naruto said, his expression grim as he reinforced the sphere. "Or it was. Now it's a prisoner." The creature rose, its watery form swelling. The plaza, the entire sunken city, was its domain. With a gesture, the abyssal water esced into hundreds of spears of sharpened, solidified shadow, all of them aimed at the golden bubble. "Hold on," Naruto said. The sphere shot forward, weaving through the volley of spears with impossible speed and agility. He guided them through the labyrinthine city, the guardian in hot pursuit. It was a being of immense power, but its movements were clumsy, filled with the fury of a wounded animal. "Its attacks are wild," Hancock noted, her battle instincts taking over. She pressed a hand to the sphere's wall, concentrating, her observation hockey reaching out. "Its energy, it's chaotic, but there's a focal point. A core. It's inside its chest, a knot of pure, cold hatred. That's the void's anchor," Naruto said, bringing the sphere to a sharp halt in a narrow canyon between two towers. "If I can destroy that, it should free the guardian. But I need to get close. Then let me give you an opening," she said, her eyes hard with determination. Naruto dissolved the sphere. The crushing pressure of the deep sea slammed in. But for a split second, he held it back with a repulsive blast of his own chakra, giving them a pocket of breathable air. In that instant, Hancock acted. Slave arrow. She fired a volley of pink, Petrifying arrows, not at the creature's body, but at the water around it. The water turned to solid stone, creating a momentary cage, trapping the guardian's limbs. It was a brilliant, tactical move he would never have thought of. The guardian roared in fury, shattering the stone with a single pulse of power, but the opening was all Naruto needed. He entered Sage mode in a heartbeat, a golden aura flaring to life, pushing back the dark and the cold. He shot towards the creature, a Rasengan forming in his palm. The guardian met his charge, its shadowy arm transforming into a massive, swirling vortex of corrupted water designed to tear him apart. Naruto slammed his Rasengan into the vortex. Light and shadow clashed in a silent, violent explosion of energy. The guardian was powerful, its raw strength nearly overwhelming, but it was all instinct, no technique. Naruto, the master of combat, flowed around its wild attacks, looking for the core Hancock had identified. Its rage is making it stronger. Hancock called out, firing more arrows to distract it, to keep its attention divided. It's feeding on its own despair. Naruto saw it too. The more he fought it, the more he pushed against it. The more the void's corruption seemed to flourish. Brute force wasn't the answer. There was only one other way. A far more dangerous one. He disengaged, appearing beside Hancock in a flash. I can't beat it like this. I have to go inside. Not its body, its mind. Its consciousness. I think I can sever the connection to the void from there. Hancock stared at him, her eyes wide with alarm. You can't be serious. If its mind is as chaotic as its power, it will tear your spirit apart. It was too risky, a gamble with his very soul. Her pragmatic mind screamed for him to just destroy the thing, end the threat, and be done with it. But then she looked at his face. She saw the unwavering conviction, the deep empathy he had for this tragic, monstrous being. She was the same look he'd had when he faced down the celestial dragon. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a savior, and in that moment, her trust in him became absolute. The core, she said, her voice firm, all doubt gone. Its consciousness is anchored there. I can feel it. I will guide you. He gave her a grateful nod. It was a level of trust he had only ever shared with his closest comrades. To feel it from her, here, in the darkest pit of the world, solidified something profound between them. Then get ready, he said. He closed his eyes and unleashed his full power. The golden aura of the Six Paths Sage mode erupted around him. A sun in the crushing dark. The 9 truth-seeking orbs materialized, forming a protective halo. He was no longer just a man, he was a conduit of pure, life-affirming energy. A direct counter to the entropic cold of the void. He shot towards the guardian, not as an attacker, but as a meteor of golden light. The guardian raised its arms to defend itself, but Naruto didn't aim for the body. He phased right through its shadowy form, his target the knot of cold hatred Hancock had pinpointed in its chest. The moment he made contact, his world dissolved. He was no longer in the sunken city. He was adrift in an endless, silent sea of black, featureless space. He was inside the guardian's consciousness. For eons, it had known nothing but this. A solitary, dreamless vigil. The silent guardian of a silent city. It was not painful, but it was an eternity of utter, absolute loneliness. Then, the whisper had come. A voice from the cold nothingness, promising companionship, promising purpose. A tendril of that cold static had reached out and touched its spirit. And then came the agony. The void did not give, it consumed. It fed on the guardian's loneliness, twisting it into despair. It fed on its duty, twisting it into rage. It hollowed out its ancient soul and made it a puppet of mindless fury. Naruto saw it all in a flash, a billion years of solitude and a decade of torment. He pushed past the pain and saw the core of the being, a faint, flickering blue light, the last ember of its true self, trapped in a cage of solidified shadow. And wrapped around that cage was the parasite, the void, a being of pure, anti-life. You do not belong here, child of light, the void whispered, its voice the sound of dying stars. All things must end, all light must fade, this vessel is mine. You're wrong, Naruto projected back, his own spirit a blazing sun in the mental darkness. An end is not the same as erasure. And you will not have him. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his will. He channeled every positive emotion he had. The boisterous laughter of his friends, the pride he felt for his village, the quiet warmth of holding Hancock's hand on the deck of her ship. He poured all that light, all that life, into the connection between the void and the Guardian's soul. It was like trying to tear two pieces of reality apart. The strain was immense, a psychic agony that dwarfed any physical pain he had ever known. The void fought back, showing him images of his own failures, of his own loneliness, trying to infect him with the same despair. But Naruto's will, forged in a crucible of war and loss and ultimate triumph, was unbreakable. With a final, desperate surge of power, he roared his defiance into the mental void, and tore the connection apart. A scream of pure, undiluted hatred echoed through the mental plane as the void's presence was violently ejected. Back in the sunken city, the Guardian convulsed. A torrent of black, oily energy erupted from its chest. A shrieking pillar of pure corruption that shot up into the dark water before dissipating into nothing. The Guardian's form stabilized. The swirling shadows and purple light faded away, replaced by a being of pure, crystalline water, its form now serene and noble. The two burning voids in its face resolved into gentle, blue eyes filled with an ancient, weary wisdom. It looked at Naruto, who was now floating, his golden aura flickering, the effort having taken a massive toll. It raised a hand, and a single, pure thought was projected into his and Hancock's minds. "Thank you, child of stars. You have undone a great wrong." The thought was followed by an image, a warning. "The silent entropy you have banished, it is but a sliver of a greater whole. It seeks to unmake all stars, to return all existence to the cold, quiet nothing from which it came. Beware its arbitrator. He wears a face of order, but brings only oblivion." The message was delivered. The Guardian bowed its head, its duty fulfilled. And then its form dissolved, its life energy finally spent, becoming one with the calm, clean water of the deep sea. The immense strain of the spiritual battle finally crashed down on Naruto. His divine energy was exhausted. The truth-seeking orbs vanished. The golden aura sputtered and died. His body went limp, his consciousness fading to black. He began to fall through the dark water like a stone. Hancock had been watching the entire spectacle, her heart pounding with a terror so profound it stole the air from her lungs. The moment she saw his light go out, the moment she saw him fall, she moved. There was no hesitation, no thought. There was only a desperate, primal need to get to him. She kicked off the stone tower she was perched on, a powerful surge of motion that propelled her through the water. She caught him, wrapping her arms around his unconscious form, pulling him tight against her. His body was limp, his face pale, but he was breathing. He was alive. She held him there, in the silent, eerie beauty of the now cleansed sunken city, 1,000 meters below the sun. The great pirate empress, the woman who hated all men, who kept the world at arm's length with a shield of arrogance and beauty, was gone. In her place was only a woman, her face a mask of raw fear and fierce protectiveness, clinging to the one person in the universe who had managed to find his way into her locked-away heart. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Scars of the Sun. Naruto awoke to the gentle rocking of the ship and the scent of salt and medicinal herbs. The first thing he saw was a cascade of long, black hair. Hancock was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head resting on her folded arms, her face turned towards him. In sleep, the formidable mask of the Empress was gone, replaced by a soft vulnerability that made his chest ache. Her brow was furrowed with a lingering worry, even in her dreams. He felt a profound exhaustion, a soul-deep weariness that went beyond physical depletion. The battle in the sunken god's mind had scraped him raw, but they had won. He looked at the woman sleeping beside him, the fierce warrior who had guided him through a storm of spiritual agony. The terrified woman who had pulled him from the crushing abyss. A feeling, warm and bright and powerful, bloomed in his chest. It was a feeling he had mistaken for many things in his life: friendship, camaraderie, duty. Now, with the clarity of a man who had been stripped to his very essence, he recognized it for what it was. Simple, complicated, absolute. He slowly reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before he gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather-light, but her eyes snapped open instantly, the sharp, reflexive motion of a predator. The moment she saw it was him. The hardness in her gaze melted, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated relief. You're awake, she breathed, her voice raspy from sleep. Thanks to you, he said, his own voice hoarse. How long was I out? A day, she answered, sitting up straighter, trying to reclaim some of her composure, but her eyes betrayed her. They scanned him, checking for any sign of injury, any lingering shadow of the ordeal. You were completely drained. We were all concerned. We. The word hung in the air. She meant her crew, of course, but her gaze made it deeply personal. He offered her a small, reassuring smile. I'm okay. Just tired. The smile seemed to break through the last of her defenses. A real, genuine smile touched her own lips. It was a rare, breathtaking sight. Like seeing the sun rise for the first time. Good, she said softly. You had me. She cut herself off, unwilling or unable to finish the thought, to admit the depth of her fear. She stood abruptly, turning away from him. You should rest. I will have them bring you some food. She was a breath away from the door when the world ended. There was no sound, no flash of light, no violent lurch. One moment, she was reaching for the wooden door of his cabin on the perfume Yuta. The next, her hand was touching cold, unyielding gold. The scent of salt and sea was gone, replaced by the cloying, sterile perfume of incense and wealth. The gentle rocking of the ship had ceased, replaced by a dead, unnerving stillness. Hancock froze, her blood turning to ice. She knew this door. She knew this scent. She knew this silence. She turned around slowly, her body trembling. They were no longer in the ship's cabin. They were in a vast, opulent bedchamber, a gilded cage of marble pillars, silk draperies, and priceless art. It was a room in the heart of the holy land of Mary Geoise. A room she had not seen since she was a child. Her prison. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, the exhaustion vanishing, replaced by a surge of pure adrenaline. He was beside her in a flash, his senses screaming. This wasn't a genjutsu, not in the way he understood it. It was too real, too solid. The air tasted different, the light felt wrong. Kurama was roaring in his mind, a furious, confused sound. Kit, what is this? It's not real, but it feels real. What did you do? Hancock whispered, backing away from him. Her eyes wide with a terror so profound it made her seem like a different person. What is this trick? It's not me, Naruto said, his voice low and urgent, reaching for her. Hancock, it's an illusion. A powerful one. His words didn't seem to register. Her gaze was fixed on something over his shoulder. Her face, already pale, lost the last of its color. She let out a small, broken sound, the whimper of a terrified animal. Naruto turned. Standing in the archway of the room was a celestial dragon, his features bloated and cruel, his eyes filled with a lazy, proprietary malice. It was him, Saint Jalmik, the monster who had purchased her and her sisters all those years ago. The god of her nightmares. Well, the illusion of the world noble sneered, his voice a perfect, sickening replica. It seems my favorite pet has brought a friend. Another stray to be broken. He's not real, Naruto said, placing himself between the illusion and Hancock. He could feel her trembling behind him. The confident empress had vanished, completely consumed by the traumatized child. Oh, I am quite real to her, a new voice said, smooth and calm, echoing from the very air around them. Reality, after all, is merely a matter of perception. And her perception is now my domain. From the shadows in the corner of the room, a figure emerged. He was impeccably dressed in a simple, dark suit, his face unremarkable. His posture relaxed. It was the man from the fountain in Mary Geoise. The avatar. His eyes were the same, abyssal voids that seemed to drink the light. You, Naruto snarled, his body coiling. Every instinct screaming at him to attack, to obliterate this thing. Me, the being confirmed with a slight, chillingly pleasant smile. You may call me the arbitrator. I am the will of the celestial void. And I am here to correct a flaw in the cosmic design. You sent that Sea King, Naruto stated, his mind racing. You corrupted that guardian. Minor tests, the arbitrator said with a dismissive wave. I wished to observe the nature of your power. It is chaotic. It is predicated on emotion, on attachment, on bonds. These things are the source of all suffering, all conflict. They are aberrations, flaws in the grand tapestry. I exist to prune them. He gestured towards Hancock, who had collapsed into a trembling heap on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes wide and vacant. Take her, for example. Her existence is defined by a singular, traumatic emotional event. Her power, her hatred, her pride, it all stems from that wound. You, with your misplaced empathy, believe you can heal that wound. You form an attachment, a bond. You introduce more chaos, more unpredictability into the system. The arbitrator took a step closer, his void-like eyes fixed on Naruto. I am not here to destroy you, Naruto Uzumaki. I am here to teach you. I will show you the futility of your attachments. I will make you watch as the very emotion you cherish breaks the one you cherish. I will make you understand that true order, true peace, can only be achieved through absolute nullification. Through the void. The illusion of Saint Jalmik laughed, a cruel, grating sound. He walked towards the terrified Hancock, pulling a long, iron rod from a nearby brazier, its tip glowing a malevolent red. It is time for your re-education, pet. You seem to have forgotten your place. Hancock screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure, helpless terror. Naruto moved. He didn't use a jutsu. He didn't flare his chakra. He simply tried to appear in front of Jalmik, to shield her. But the air thickened, becoming like concrete. The arbitrator hadn't moved, but his will was absolute in this domain. Naruto was held fast, forced to watch. Your power is useless here, the arbitrator's voice echoed. This world is built from her memories and my power. It obeys her trauma, and in this place, he is her god. You are nothing. The hot iron drew closer to Hancock's back, to the place where her brand was. She wasn't fighting back. She was paralyzed by memory, lost in the nightmare. Naruto struggled against the invisible force, his muscles straining. Rage, pure and white-hot, flooded him. He could unleash Kurama. He could try to rip this dimension apart with raw power, but he could feel it. The illusion was tied directly to Hancock's consciousness. If he shattered it with force, he might shatter her mind along with it. He was trapped. The arbitrator was right. His strength was useless. He had to find another way. He stopped fighting the restraints and forced himself to look past the monstrous illusion of the celestial dragon. He looked at Hancock. The real Hancock. The terrified child huddled on the floor. He couldn't fight this reality. So he had to enter it. Hancock. He shouted, his voice desperate. Look at me. It's me, Naruto. This isn't real. She didn't respond. Her eyes were glazed over, lost in the past. The branding iron was inches away. He closed his eyes, shutting out the horrifying sight, and reached inward. He couldn't fight the illusion from the outside. He had to reach her on the inside. Just as he had with the Guardian, he pushed his own consciousness forward, not as an attack, but as a desperate plea. He focused on their bond, on the memory of her hand in his, on the trust in her eyes during their spar. He used that connection as a bridge. He found her. Her spirit was a flickering candle in a hurricane of black, terrifying memories. She was small, alone, and utterly convinced that this pain was her entire reality. He didn't try to pull her out. He couldn't. Instead, he brought himself in. He let his own memories, his own pain, flow across the bridge. He showed her flashes of his own life. A small, blond boy sitting alone on a swing, watching other children play with their parents. The hatred in the eyes of the villagers. The mocking graffiti painted on his apartment door. The crushing, absolute loneliness of a childhood his very existence was treated as a curse. I know what it's like, his thoughts whispered into her consciousness. To be alone. To be treated like a monster. To have the world look at you and see only the mark you carry. A flicker of recognition. Her spirit trembled. The illusionary world wavered for a fraction of a second. The branding iron paused. The arbitrator sensed the shift. Emotional resonance, he mused. His voice tinged with academic curiosity. A futile gesture. Her trauma is a singularity. It cannot be overridden. He's wrong, Naruto projected, pushing harder, pouring more of himself into the connection. He showed her the moments that had saved him. Iruka-sensei treating him to ramen, acknowledging him for the first time. The formation of Team 7, the infuriating but undeniable bond with Sasuke and Sakura. The gruff, paternal guidance of Jiraiya. The fierce loyalty of his friends who stood with him during the Pain invasion. He showed her that the mark, the curse, did not have to be the end of the story. You are not a slave, he said, his voice now echoing both in the illusionary room and in the depths of her mind. You are the Empress of Amazon Lily. You are a warrior. You are a captain. You are a queen. The illusion of Saint Jalmik snarled, his face twisting. Lies. You are my property. You will always be my property. He lunged, thrusting the branding iron forward. In that final, critical moment, Naruto didn't show her his strength. He showed her his vulnerability. He showed her the image of himself from just a day ago, unconscious, helpless, falling through the dark water. And the image of her, strong and fierce, catching him. You saved me, his voice echoed, a profound and simple truth. You were strong enough to pull me from the dark. You are strong enough to pull yourself out now. I am here. You are not alone. Something broke. Not the illusion. Something inside Hancock. A dam of pain and memory that had held for more than a decade. The image of Naruto, broken and needing her, superimposed itself over the image of the sneering celestial dragon. The memory of his hand in hers, warm and safe, overwhelmed the memory of the cold iron. Her head snapped up. Her eyes, once vacant with terror, now blazed with a furious, incandescent light. It was the fire of the pirate empress, reforged in the hell of her own past and quenched in the waters of his unwavering acceptance. No, she whispered, the word a gathering storm. The branding iron was an inch from her back when her hand shot out, impossibly fast, and caught Saint Jalmik's wrist. Her grip was like steel. The illusionary celestial dragon stared, his cruel sneer replaced by shock. You, she snarled, her voice a low, venomous growl, do not get to touch me. Not anymore. With a roar of pure, liberated rage, she unleashed her haki. It was not the controlled, oppressive aura of a conqueror. It was a raw, unbound explosion of her very soul. It was the scream of a child who had finally found her voice. Amplified by the power of an empress. The gilded room didn't just crack. It shattered like glass. The illusion of Saint Jalmik dissolved into shrieking motes of black dust. The marble floors, the silk curtains. The entire fabricated reality was wiped away in an instant by the sheer force of her will. The arbitrator stood in the center of the collapsing unreality, his pleasant smile finally gone. Replaced by an expression of cold, analytical surprise. Impossible, he breathed. The emotional variable is stronger than anticipated. Naruto felt the restraints on him vanish. The illusion crumbled around them, revealing the familiar wooden walls of the ship's cabin. He and Hancock were standing in the center of the room, her hand still held out as if gripping an enemy that was no longer there. They were both panting, their bodies drenched in sweat, the psychic backlash of the ordeal washing over them. The arbitrator was still there, a fading, translucent image. He looked at them, not as victims, but as a failed experiment. This changes nothing, he stated, his voice a cold whisper that seemed to come from a vast distance. You have proven only that chaos can sometimes fight chaos. But the system must still be balanced. The flaw must still be corrected. I will be waiting. His image dissolved into nothing, leaving behind a profound silence and the lingering chill of the void. Hancock's strength finally gave out. Her legs buckled. Naruto caught her, his arms wrapping around her as they sank to the floor together. She was trembling uncontrollably, great, racking sobs tearing through her body. It was not the weeping of a queen, but the raw, unfiltered grief of a child who had finally been allowed to cry. He didn't say anything. He didn't offer platitudes or tell her it was over. He just held her, his embrace a solid, unwavering anchor in the storm of her pain. He let her cry, let her scream, let all the years of repressed terror and rage pour out of her. He accepted all of it, all the broken pieces she had kept hidden from the world. He had stood with her in her nightmare, and he would stay with her in the aftermath. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed. The violent sobs slowly subsided into quiet, exhausted tears. She was leaning against his chest, her face buried in his shirt, her hands gripping his arms as if he were the only solid thing in the universe. She finally looked up at him. Her beautiful face streaked with tears, her dark eyes raw and vulnerable. The last wall, the final defense around her heart, had been obliterated. He was going to, she whispered, her voice breaking. And you came for me. Always, Naruto replied, his own voice thick with emotion. He gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I will always come for you. Her breath hitched. She saw in his eyes not pity, but a fierce, protective devotion. She saw an acceptance so complete it encompassed her past, her pain, her power, and all the darkness she had hidden away. He had seen the absolute worst of her, the most broken and terrified version of herself, and he had not fled. He had embraced it. In that moment, the confusion, the fear, the obsessive curiosity she had felt for him all coalesced into a single, undeniable, terrifying truth. "I love you," she whispered, the words torn from the deepest part of her soul. It was not a question. It was a confession, a surrender. Naruto's heart felt like it was going to burst. He looked into her eyes, the eyes of the strongest, most fragile, most beautiful woman he had ever known, and he gave her the same truth. A truth he had only just found himself. "I love you, too, Hancock," he said, his voice firm and clear. And then he leaned in and kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, but of profound, desperate affirmation. It was a promise, sealed in the quiet aftermath of a shared hell, that neither of them would ever have to be alone again. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Unforgiven King. The arbitrator's assault left a scar not on their bodies, but on the very atmosphere of the ship. The air was heavy with the aftermath of a storm no one else had witnessed. Hancock, for the first time since Naruto had known her, was quiet. The fiery arrogance, the regal command, it was all muted, replaced by a fragile, tentative peace. She stayed close to him, a constant, reassuring presence at his side. The confession, the kiss, had irrevocably altered the space between them. They were no longer a queen and her mysterious ward, but two people bound by a shared trauma and a nascent, fiercely protective love. Naruto knew they couldn't continue aimlessly. The arbitrator had revealed his hand. This was not a random series of events, it was a campaign. And the Void's avatar was intelligent, strategic, and would undoubtedly strike again. They needed information, a way to understand the enemy, to predict its movements. "The Guardian in the Sunken City," Naruto said, as they stood on the deck watching the endless blue horizon. "It mentioned a name, the Arbitrator, and it warned me that the Void seeks to unmake all stars. This isn't just about me or this world. It's a cosmic threat." Hancock listened, her brow furrowed. The sheer scale of it was hard to grasp, but she didn't doubt him for a second. She had felt the Void's chilling touch in the prison of her own mind. And this arbitrator, he is its agent. He's more than that, Naruto mused, remembering the Avatar's cold, analytical eyes. He's a believer. He thinks what he's doing is right. He called emotion and attachment flaws, to be pruned. Those are the most dangerous kind of enemies, the ones who think they're the heroes of the story. He turned to her, his expression serious. "We need to know more. Legends, forgotten histories, anything that speaks of a celestial void, or a power that erases things from existence. Your world is ancient. Someone, somewhere, must know something." Hancock considered this. The world. Government's libraries were the most extensive, but they were inaccessible. The poneglyphs spoke of an ancient history, but they were nearly impossible to find and decipher. They needed a different source. A source that operated in the shadows. "There is a place," she said slowly, a flicker of something dark and unpleasant in her eyes. "An island in the new world that belongs to no one and everyone. It is a haven for information brokers, spies, and the kind of people who trade in secrets that could topple kingdoms. It is called Whisperwind." She paused, her lips thinning into a hard line. "She is also ruled by a man I have a history with." Naruto caught the undertone in her voice immediately. "Bad history." A bitter, humorless smile touched her lips. "Is there any other kind in the Grand Line?" She replied cryptically. "His name is Kalen. He calls himself the Memory King. He has the power of the memo fruit. He can read, steal, and even alter memories with a touch. It is how he built his empire of secrets." She looked away, towards the sea. "Years ago, before I was a warlord, our paths crossed. He saw my beauty not as something to be admired, but as a prize to be catalogued and owned. He tried to take my memories of my past, to make me his perfect, beautiful, amnesiac queen. I defeated him. I humiliated him. I left him broken. And now we have to go ask him for help," Naruto finished. Understanding the predicament. "He will not help," Hancock stated flatly. He will see this as an opportunity for revenge. He is a proud, vindictive man. He will use everything in his power to see me fall. Then we won't ask, Naruto said, his voice firm, a glint of steel in his eyes. We'll persuade. Whisperwind Island was a chaotic, dizzying place. It was a city built in a spiral around a colossal, petrified tree. With rope bridges, rickety platforms, and shadowy alleys creating a vertical maze. The air was thick with the smoke of 100 different cooking fires and murmur of 1,000 different languages. Information was the only currency that mattered here, and every conversation seemed to be a guarded, coded transaction. Naruto's senses were on high alert. The place was teeming with Haki users, devil fruit eaters, and assassins for hire. It was a viper's nest. They didn't arrive on the perfume Yuta. Instead, they took a smaller, unmarked vessel, docking in a hidden cove. Naruto, Hancock, and her two sisters, Sandersonia and Marigold, were the only ones who went ashore, disguised in simple traveling cloaks to hide their identities. Hancock's fame, or infamy, was too great to walk these streets openly. They made their way to the heart of the city, a tavern called the Fated Page, which was known to be the unofficial court of the Memory King. The tavern was dark and crowded, filled with dangerous-looking individuals exchanging whispered secrets over mugs of ale. They took a booth in a shadowy corner, and Naruto immediately felt the shift in the atmosphere. Their arrival, despite their cloaks, had not gone unnoticed. A network of unseen eyes and ears was reporting their presence. The trap was already being set. He knows we're here, Marigold whispered nervously, her hand resting on the hilt of her weapon. Of course he does, Hancock replied, her voice a low growl. She pulled back her hood, her beautiful, severe face revealed. A wave of gasps and shocked murmurs went through the tavern. The pirate empress was on Whisperwind. Let him come. I will not hide from that worm. They didn't have to wait long. A man approached their table. He was tall and unnervingly handsome, with silver hair tied back in a neat tail and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He wore fine, tailored clothes and moved with the predatory grace of a panther. A cruel, intelligent smile played on his lips. This was Kalen, the Memory King. Boa Hancock, he said, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone that dripped with condescension. To what do I owe the displeasure? Have you finally come to your senses and decided to accept my generous offer? Though I must admit, your value has depreciated with age. Sandersonia let out a low growl, but Hancock held up a hand, silencing her. Save your pathetic attempts at wit, Kalen. We are here for information. Kalen laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Information. You come into my domain, after what you did to me, and demand information. The arrogance is almost breathtaking. His stormy eyes flicked to Naruto, who sat calmly, observing. And who is this? Your latest boy toy. He doesn't seem your type. Far too serene. He is my partner, Hancock said, the words clear and firm, a subtle but powerful claim. And he is the reason we are here. We seek knowledge of an ancient entity, a celestial void. A power that erases. Kalen's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of genuine shock, or perhaps fear, crossed his features before he masked it. You speak of bedtime stories. Old wives' tales to frighten children. Quote, don't lie to me, Naruto said, speaking for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the tavern, drawing every eye. You know what we're talking about. We can feel it in your memory. It's faint, but it's there. A story your grandmother told you. A fear you've carried your whole life. Kalen's face went pale. Naruto hadn't used a jutsu. He had simply used his empathetic senses, honed by sage mode, to read the emotional residue clinging to the man's spirit. He knew Kalen was lying. Kalen recovered quickly, his shock hardening into rage. You dare, he hissed, to try and read me. The Memory King. He took a step back, his composure cracking. You want my secrets? Then come and take them. Suddenly, the tavern patrons all rose as one. Their eyes were glazed over, their movements stiff and unnatural. Kalen had altered their memories, turning them into a mindless puppet army. They drew weapons and began to converge on the booth. A predictable tactic, Hancock sneered, rising to her feet. But before the fight could begin, Kalen did something unexpected. He lunged, Not at Hancock, but at a serving girl who had been cowering nearby. He placed a hand on her head. "A gift, Hancock," he said with a vicious grin. A trip down memory lane. A wave of psychic energy erupted from him. But it wasn't an attack. It was a broadcast. He had stolen the serving girl's most traumatic memory, a pirate raid on her village, and was now forcing everyone in the room to experience it. Naruto felt a flash of fire, of screams and terror, but he pushed it aside easily. His mind was a fortress. Hancock's sisters, however, were not so prepared. They cried out, staggering as the brutal, second-hand trauma assaulted their minds. Kalen's puppets faltered, their own minds overwhelmed by the psychic feedback. It was a chaotic, insidious form of warfare. But then Naruto noticed something else. A faint, dark energy was coalescing around Kalen. A sliver of the void's power. The arbitrator hadn't just let them walk away. He had planted a seed, found a vessel of resentment and ambition, and given it a nudge. Kalen wasn't just using his devil fruit. He was amplifying it with the void's corrupting influence, allowing him to not just manipulate memory, but to weaponize the very concept of trauma. "This is his new power," Naruto said, realizing the true nature of the trap. "He's not trying to beat us with puppets. He's trying to drown us in pain." "Then I will not play his game," Hancock declared. This was her fight. She had faced her own past, her own trauma. In the arbitrator's illusion, Kalen's cheap tricks were nothing. Her place was here, to end this, while Naruto protected her sisters. She met Naruto's gaze, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. He trusted her. She moved, a red blur cutting through the chaos. Kalen, seeing her approach, merely smiled. "You cannot touch me, Empress. Not without reliving every moment of your own pathetic, painful life." He reached out a hand, his palm glowing with a dark, mnemonic energy. This was the core of his revenge. He would force her to face her past as a slave, to break her spirit with her own memories, just as the arbitrator had tried to do. But the woman he was facing was not the same woman he had fought all those years ago. She had faced those demons and had emerged stronger. She met his outstretched hand not with fear, but with a cold, focused fury. She didn't try to dodge. She didn't try to block. She moved with a new kind of precision, a clarity of purpose she had learned from sparring with Naruto. Her movements were no longer just about overwhelming power, they were about strategy. As his hand came towards her, she unleashed her conqueror's haki. But she didn't project it outwards to knock out the puppets. She focused it, condensed it into a razor-thin, invisible blade of pure will, and aimed it directly at Kalen's mind. It was a technique born of her battle with the arbitrator, an application of her power she had never conceived of before. Kalen's psychic attack hit a wall of pure, indomitable will. His eyes widened in shock. As his own power was turned back on him, he staggered back, clutching his head, a scream tearing from his lips. He was experiencing a feedback loop of every painful memory he had ever stolen. Hancock didn't hesitate. She flowed forward, her leg snapping out in a powerful kick. But she didn't aim for his head or his chest. She aimed for the shard of void energy that pulsed within him, a dark spot only she and Naruto could perceive. Her haki-coated heel struck the core of the corruption. There was no explosion, but a sickening, tearing sound, like ripping fabric. The dark energy shattered, dissipating with a final, hateful hiss. Kalen was thrown backwards, crashing through a wall and into the street, his devil fruit power severed from its dark amplifier. He lay in the rubble, groaning, his mind a wreck, his borrowed power gone. Hancock stood over him, not in triumph, but in judgment. The arrogant, preening memory king had been reduced to a broken man, defeated not by his rival's power, but by her strength of character. She had confronted the person she used to be, a ruler who led through fear and intimidation, and had chosen a different path. "The information, Kalen," she said, her voice cold and devoid of passion. Now, quote, defeated, his mind reeling from the psychic backlash, Kalen finally broke. He looked up at her, at the woman who had not only bested his power but had transcended the very trauma he sought to use against her, and he saw not a rival, but a force of nature. Through gasps of pain, he told them the story. The tale of the void was an ancient one, a myth from the age before the world government. It spoke of the great silence, a cosmic entity that predated the world, which would periodically awaken to correct existence, to erase powers and beings that grew strong enough to warp reality. Its agents were the arbitrators, beings created to carry out its will. The legends said that the only thing that could resist the silence was not power, but a force of unbreakable connection, a will so strong it could anchor reality around it. As he finished, the sound of marching feet echoed through the streets. The Marines had arrived, drawn by the commotion. "We have what we came for," Naruto said, appearing at Hancock's side, his hand resting on her shoulder. "It's time to go." Hancock gave the broken memory king one last look. She could have killed him. Old Hancock would have turned him to stone without a second thought. Instead, she just turned and walked away. She had not come here for revenge. She had come for answers. And in defeating her old rival, she had also defeated a part of her old self. They melted back into the shadows of Whisperwind, leaving the Marines to deal with the chaos, their new knowledge a heavy weight in their minds. The enemy had a name, a history, and a purpose, and the legend had given them a clue, a sliver of hope. An unbreakable connection, a will strong enough to anchor reality. Hancock looked at Naruto, at the man who had walked into her nightmare and led her out. She felt his hand, a warm and steady presence on her shoulder. She knew, with absolute certainty, what the legend was talking about. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Celestial Alliance. The knowledge they had gained from Kalen was a poison with no antidote. It seeped into the quiet moments on the ship, turning contemplation into a grim exercise in existential dread. The enemy wasn't a pirate with a dream of conquest or a government with a lust for control. It was a cosmic principle of erasure, a sentient silence that believed life itself was a flaw in the universe. How could a fleet of ships, an army of warriors, fight a concept? Naruto found himself staring at his own hands, at the golden light he could summon at will. His power, which had once seemed limitless, a tool to protect and build, now felt like a beacon in an infinite darkness, attracting the attention of something ancient and hungry. The arbitrator's words echoed in his mind. "I exist to prune flaws." He and others like him, beings who could bend reality to their will through haki, devil fruits, or chakra, were the flaws. They were the anomalies that the void sought to correct. Hancock watched him, her heart aching with a pain that was not her own. She saw the weight settle on his shoulders, the same burden of a world-saving destiny he thought he had left behind. But this time, he wasn't alone. She had stepped out of the prison of her past, and she would not allow him to build one for himself out of his duty. She would approach him in the quiet of the night, bringing him tea she had brewed herself. They wouldn't speak of the void or the end of all things. Instead, she would ask him about his friends, about the taste of the ramen he missed so much, about the color of the sky in his world. And he, in turn, would ask about her sisters, about the history of the Kuja, about the name of the great, hooded sea serpents that pulled their ship. They were building an anchor, a small, fiercely protected reality of their own, to brace against the coming storm. They were proving the legend right before they even had to test it. They were forging an unbreakable connection. It was during one of these quiet nights, as the perfume Yuta sailed through the deceptively calm waters of the New World, that they were found. There was no lookout's cry, no warning shot. A single, small boat, unmarked and impossibly fast, appeared behind them as if it had risen from the sea itself. On its deck stood a solitary figure in the white suit of Cipher Pole Aegis Zero. But this was no ordinary agent. His face was hidden behind a bland, expressionless mask, and his presence was so utterly controlled that he felt like a void in Naruto's senses, a man who had perfected the art of erasing himself. He didn't hail them. He simply appeared on their deck, moving with a speed and silence that even Naruto barely registered. The Kuja warriors swarmed him in an instant, a dozen blades at his throat. He remained perfectly still, his hands held open in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," the agent said, his voice a flat, toneless sound. He was looking directly at Naruto and Hancock. "I carry a message directly from the Five Elders and Fleet Admiral Sakazuki." Hancock's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "The world government has a great deal of nerve, sending a dog to my ship after the welcome we received in Mary Geoise. The incident in Mary Geoise is precisely why I am here," the agent responded, his masked face unreadable. Your associate, he said, gesturing to Naruto, demonstrated a power that operates outside any known classification. Later, a marine patrol vessel engaged Vice Admiral Onagumo's retreating fleet and found them in a state of disarray, their rapport. TS speaking of a single man who neutralized their entire barrage. He paused. Then there is the matter of Whisperwind Island. Our sources report that the Memory King, Kalen, suffered a complete PSYC. Hit collapse after a confrontation with you. His last coherent words were of a celestial void, and the end of all things. Naruto and Hancock exchanged a look. The world government's intelligence network was as formidable as its military. It seems, the agent continued, that you have attracted the attention of more than just the Marines. We have also had incidents. A research outpost in the North Blue that went silent. Its entire staff vanished, leaving behind only a cold, empty space where their life signatures used to be. A seastone shipment that disappeared from a locked vault, the Me. Tal itself seemingly erased from existence. These are small things, whispers, but the whispers are growing louder. He reached into his coat and produced a single, black Den Den Mushi, its shell intricately carved. It was dormant, its eyes closed. The 5 elders are old men. They have seen the rise and fall of legends. They recognize a threat that transcends politics and piracy. They wish to propose a meeting. A temporary alliance of convenience to address a mutual threat. An alliance, Hancock scoffed, with the same people who put this brand on my back. Never. The venom in her voice was absolute. We understand your reluctance, the agent said, his tone unchanging. But the entity you hunt does not distinguish between pirates and nobles. It will consume everything. The elders believe, the being you travel with may be the only power in the world capable of confronting it. He placed the black Den Den Mushi on the deck. This will ring once, in 3 days' time. It will give you coordinates for a neutral meeting ground. Who you will meet there will be a surprise. We hope you will make the pragmatic choice. With that, he stepped back towards the railing. A word of advice, he added, looking directly at Naruto. Not all of us in the government are blind. Some of us serve the world, not the men who rule it. Be wary of who you trust. Absolute justice is a fine slogan, but it is a poor shield against oblivion. Quote. He then stepped off the railing and vanished into the night, his boat already gone, leaving only the cryptic warning and the silent, black snail on the deck. For 3 days, the Den Den Mushi was the focal point of a silent, heavy debate. To trust the world government was unthinkable, a betrayal of everything Hancock and her people stood for. It was almost certainly a trap. But the agent's words had the ring of truth, and the memory of the arbitrator's cold, cosmic certainty was still fresh in their minds. This was a war they couldn't fight alone. It's a risk, Naruto said, as they stood before the snail on the 3rd day. But Kalen's legend said the void erases beings that can warp reality. That's not just me. That's every powerful devil fruit user, every master of hockey. That's the admirals, the emperors, the warlords. This is their fight too, whether they know it or not. And if it is a trap, Hancock countered, her arms crossed, her expression a mask of stone. They will lead us into an ambush. An army of vice admirals, a buster call, the seraphim, they will throw everything they have at you. They can try, Naruto said, his confidence not arrogant, but a simple statement of fact. He met her gaze, his own eyes soft but unwavering. You faced your past for me. You stood between me and an admiral. You trusted me in the abyss. Now, trust me with this. Together. The last word was the key. Together. Her resolve hardened. She had faced down a celestial dragon's ghost. She could certainly face down his living dogs. Very well, she said, her voice ringing with command. We will attend their meeting. But we will do it on our terms. When the black Den Den Mushi finally rang, its chirping sound unnaturally crisp, Hancock answered. A synthesized, anonymous voice gave them a set of coordinates in a desolate stretch of the New World. It was a decommissioned marine base on a barren, rocky island known only as G7. A place where secrets could be buried. Hancock issued her own terms. She and Naruto would come alone. Her ship and her crew would wait just over the horizon. Any sign of treachery, and the Kuja pirates would descend, regardless of the consequences. The voice on the other end simply said, understood, and the line went dead. G7 was a skeleton. Rusting watchtowers and crumbling concrete bunkers were the only features on an island of wind-blasted rock. It felt like a graveyard. As their small boat approached the dock, Naruto could sense the presences waiting for them. They were powerful, terrifyingly so. He and Hancock stepped onto the island, and the figures emerged from the shadows of the largest bunker. It was not an army. It was a council of monsters. Fleet Admiral Akainu was there, his magma-hot presence a suffocating wave of pure, uncompromising menace. His face was a thundercloud of suspicion, his arms crossed over the tattoo-covered chest visible beneath his open marine coat. Beside him, Admiral Kizaru lounged against a wall, his lazy expression belying the sheer, terrifying speed that radiated from him. Sengoku, the former fleet admiral, stood with them, his face grave and thoughtful, his presence a steadying, intellectual weight. And they were not alone. From another shadow emerged Dracula Mahawk, his hawk-like eyes fixed on Naruto, his hand resting on the hilt of his great black sword, Yuru. And from another, his grin a slash of predatory amusement in the grim atmosphere, came Don Quixote Doflamingo, his feathered pink coat a splash of insane color in the drab surroundings. This was not an ambush. It was a summit, a gathering of some of the most powerful and dangerous individuals in the world. So, Akainu's voice was a low growl, like grinding stone. The anomaly has arrived. His gaze was fixed on Naruto. A look of pure, undisguised hostility. You have caused a great deal of trouble. Humiliating a world noble, clashing with two admirals, disrupting the balance. I show. Old have you incinerated where you stand. And yet, you haven't, Naruto replied calmly, stepping forward, placing himself slightly in front of Hancock. Which means you need something from me more than you want me dead. So let's skip the posturing. Doflamingo let out a high-pitched chuckle. Foo, I like this one. He has no fear. It's refreshing. Mahawk said nothing, his piercing gaze simply measuring Naruto, trying to comprehend the nature of the power he had only glimpsed in Mary Geoise. It was Sengoku who took control. We are here because the world faces a threat that is beyond our experience, he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command. Our intelligence suggests you have faced this threat directly. We need to understand what we are fighting. This was the moment. An info dump would be dismissed. A lecture would be ignored. These were men of action and power. They only respected what they could see and feel. I can do better than tell you, Naruto said. He closed his eyes. I can show you. He reached out, not with his physical hands, but with his chakra, with the spiritual energy of the Sage of Six Paths. He didn't invade their minds. He created a shared, psychic space, a gentle invitation. Look, his thoughts projected. See what I have seen. He showed them everything. The visceral, reality-tearing moment the void pulled him from his own world. The ancient, enraged Sea King. Its mind poisoned by a cold whisper. The sunken city and the tragic, corrupted guardian. He showed them the arbitrator, his face a mask of order, his eyes pits of nothingness. And then, he showed them the illusion. He projected the raw, undiluted memory of Hancock's terror, of the gilded cage, of the celestial dragon's sneering face. He made them feel the arbitrator's chilling philosophy, the absolute conviction that their existence was a flaw to be erased. The projection lasted only a few seconds, but in the minds of those present, it was an eternity. When it was over, the silence on the island was absolute. Kizaru's lazy smile was gone, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Doflamingo's grin was still there, but it was strained, the look of a man who had finally seen a form of chaos so absolute it dwarfed his own ambitions. Mahawk's hand had tightened on his sword, his knuckles white. Sengoku looked pale, his mind struggling to process the cosmic horror of it all. Akainu was trembling, his fists clenched so tightly that smoke began to rise from his knuckles. He was not afraid, he was enraged. This void, this arbitrator, it was the ultimate expression of disorder. An existential threat to his creed of absolute justice. But his rage was not solely directed at the void. He turned his burning gaze on Naruto. You, he snarled. This creature follows you. You brought this curse to our world. This curse was already here, whispering in your shadows. Hancock shot back, her voice like ice, stepping to Naruto's side. He is the only one who has ever fought it and won. He is not the curse. He is the cure. He is an uncontrolled element. Akainu roared, his body beginning to glow, magma dripping from his hands. His power is a menace. The world cannot afford such a variable. Justice demands his immediate elimination. Your justice is a hammer, Akainu, Sengoku interjected, his voice sharp. And this is not a nail. It is a cancer. Did you not see what he showed us? The creature's goal is the erasure of all who possess great power. That includes you. It includes all of us. Fufufufu. Doflamingo laughed, the tension snapping back to him. The old man is right. Sakazuki, what's the point of ruling the world if the world itself is being deleted? I, for one, find this void to be exceptionally bad for business. He looked at Naruto, a new, calculating gleam in his eyes. I will side with the man who can fight the apocalypse. It seems like the more entertaining bet. I am not interested in sides, Mihawk said, his voice a low baritone. He finally drew his sword, the massive black blade seeming to drink the light. He pointed the tip at Naruto. I am interested in this. A threat that can unmake reality. An enemy beyond mortal comprehension. His lips curved into the barest hint of a smile. This is the duel I have waited my entire life for. I will not allow this void to deny me of it. I will lend you my blade, Naruto Uzumaki. For now, the battle lines were being drawn, and Akainu was finding himself on the wrong side. He was a force of nature, but he was surrounded by other, equally stubborn forces. It was then that the alliance was truly tested. A new presence appeared on the island. A marine warship had approached silently, and from it leapt a figure, a vice admiral. It was Mozambia, a giant of a man KN, known for his impenetrable Tekai defense and his unwavering loyalty to Akainu's vision of justice. Fleet Admiral Sakazuki, he bellowed, his voice strange and distorted. I have received a new truth. A new order. Your justice is a chaotic flaw. It must be corrected. All will be returned to the quiet and the order of the void. His eyes were hollow, empty voids, just like the arbitrator's. His body was surrounded by a faint, dark aura of the same corrupting energy that had twisted Kalen. The arbitrator had another pawn, and he had sent him to shatter their fragile truce before it could even begin. Mozambia charged, his target not Naruto, but the most volatile element in the room, Doflamingo. It was a perfect strategic move, designed to sow chaos and mistrust. Overheat. Doflamingo cackled, sending a whip-like string of superheated hockey at the vice admiral. The string struck Mozambia's chest but dissipated harmlessly against a Tekai shield reinforced with the void's dead energy. So scary, Kizaru drawled. Appearing in front of Mozambia in a flash of light, his leg drawn back for a devastating kick. Yasukani's sacred jewel, he unleashed a volley of light-speed energy blasts. The corrupted vice admiral roared, punching the air. The space in front of him seemed to ripple and erase, the light particles of Kizaru's attack simply vanishing as they reached him. Kizaru reappeared a safe distance away, his lazy expression gone, replaced by one of genuine shock. Well, that's a problem. Akainu let out a furious roar, seeing one of his own men, a paragon of justice, twisted int. Oh, this thing was the ultimate blasphemy. You dare mock the Marines. He launched himself forward, his entire arm transforming into a fist of pure, bubbling magma. Dai Funka. He slammed his magma fist into Mozambia. The vice admiral was driven back, his body sizzling, but the void's energy seemed to be consuming the heat, neutralizing the attack from the inside out. He was wounded, but not defeated. The situation was descending into chaos. 4 of the most powerful men in the world were attacking a single, corrupted vice admiral, and they were barely holding him at bay. Naruto moved. He wasn't joining the fray. He appeared beside Hancock. His core, he said. Just like the Guardian, the void has an anchor inside him. But I can't get close with them attacking like this. Hancock nodded, her mind already working. She stepped forward, her beauty a weapon, her voice a command that cut through the roar of battle. Enough, all of you. Your blind attacks are only feeding its power. She looked at Mihawk, world's strongest swordsman. Can you cut something that is not there? Mihawk's hawk-like eyes narrowed in understanding. He saw the faint, dark spot in Mozambia's chest that Naruto and Hancock could perceive. A normal slash would be erased. He needed something more. He sheathed Yuru for a moment, his hands gripping the hilt, his focus becoming absolute. Hancock turned to Akainu. Fleet Admiral, your magma is a force of destruction. Can you use it to hold? To contain? Akainu glared at her, but Sengoku shouted, do it, Sakazuki. Listen to her. With a guttural snarl of frustration, Akainu slammed his hands on the ground. Meteor volcano. Instead of raining down destruction, he guided the magma fists, creating a cage of molten rock around Mozambia, trapping him, holding him fast. The corrupted Vice Admiral roared, his erasing power pushing back against the magma cage. Now, Hancock commanded. Mihawk moved. He wasn't a blur of speed. He simply took one, perfectly controlled step and drew his blade. The slash he unleashed was not a wave of destructive energy. It was a line of pure, focused intent. It was a cut that severed space itself, a strike of such supreme skill that it bypassed the void's erasing defense and struck the anchor within Mozambia's soul directly. The dark energy core shattered. The Vice Admiral let out one last, agonized scream as the corrupt Cheon was violently ejected from his body, and he collapsed, unconscious. Silence fell once more on the island of G7. The 5 men, the Fleet Admiral, the former Fleet Admiral, the swordsman, and the schemer, all looked from the fallen Vice Admiral to the pirate Empress who had just, for a brief, insane moment, commanded them all. And then they looked to Naruto, who stood beside her, the calm center of the storm. Akainu's magma faded. He was breathing heavily, his rage now tempered with a grim, undeniable reality. The enemy was real. It could turn his own men against him. And these two outcasts, were the only ones who seemed to understand how to fight it. An alliance, Akainu growled, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. A temporary measure. Until the source of this corruption is purged. Then, all accounts will be settled. It wasn't an agreement born of trust. It was a pact signed in desperation. A shaky, volatile alliance of the world's strongest, most selfish, most dangerous powers. United against a single, common threat of oblivion. Naruto looked at Hancock, and she looked back at him. They had done it. They had convinced the monsters to fight the apocalypse. A fleet began to gather. A mismatched armada of marine warships and pirate vessels, preparing for a war against the encroaching silence. They were the leaders of this impossible army, standing on a precipice. Staring into the void. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The War for Reality. The Alliance was a lit fuse, a collection of volatile elements crammed into the tight space of the marine flagship, the indomitable Justice. The air was thick with the clash of colossal egos. Akainu stood on the bridge, a pillar of simmering magma and righteous fury, his mere presence making the steel deck plates feel warm. Doflamingo lounged in a stolen admiral's chair, his grin a permanent fixture of mocking amusement as he watched the Marines scramble, finding the entire apocalyptic scenario deeply entertaining. Mihawk was a statue of silent intensity, polishing the massive blade of Yuru, his focus so absolute that the chaos of the combined fleet seemed to bend around him. Naruto and Hancock stood apart from them. The calm eye of a hurricane of their own making. They were the linchpin of this impossible pact, and every faction watched them with a mixture of hope and deep-seated mistrust. The Kuja warriors on the Perfume Yuta, which sailed proudly amidst the gray marine warships, looked to their empress for guidance. The Marines, from the lowest recruit to the highest-ranking officer, watched Naruto, the anomaly. With a fearful awe, they had all seen the recordings, heard the reports. They were placing the fate of the world in the hands of a man who was, by their laws, a criminal of the highest order. It's too quiet, Hancock murmured, her gaze sweeping across the unnaturally calm sea. The enemy knows we have gathered. It should be testing us, sending its puppets. It's not a he anymore, Naruto said, his eyes closed. His sage mode active. He wasn't just sensing the world, he was listening to its heartbeat, and it was growing faint. The arbitrator was just an avatar, a finger. Now, the whole hand is about to close. As he spoke the words, it began. A single, high-pitched note, like a tuning fork struck at the heart of the universe, vibrated through the air. It wasn't a sound one heard with their ears, but with their bones, their soul. And then, the sky broke. Directly above their fleet, a point of perfect blackness appeared. It did not darken the sky, it erased it. From this point, Cracks spread outwards. Like a shattering pane of glass, but instead of blue sky, the fissures revealed a swirling, breathtaking vista of impossible colors and dying galaxies. It was a wound in the fabric of reality. A tear looking into the void itself. A beautiful, silent, and utterly horrifying vortex of non-existence. A wave of psychic dread washed over the fleet. Colors on the ships seemed to desaturate. The brilliant red of the marine symbol fading to a dull maroon, the vibrant pink of Doflamingo's coat becoming a dusty rose. Sound became muffled, as if the air itself was losing its ability to carry vibrations. All hands, brace for impact. A vice admiral roared, his voice sounding small and distant. From the swirling vortex, the enemy descended. They were not ships, not creatures of flesh and bone. They were droplets of the void given form, legions of shadow beings that seemed to absorb the very light around them. These, null forms, were vaguely humanoid, but their shapes were unstable. Constantly shifting like black flame. They carried no weapons. Their very touch was a weapon that unmade whatever it came into contact with. Foo. Finally, the party starts. Doflamingo cackled, leaping from his chair and launching into the air with his strings, eager for the chaos. The war for reality had begun. The battle was a nightmare of physics defied. Marine sea. Cannonballs would strike the null forms and simply vanish, their kinetic energy and mass erased in a silent puff of gray mist. Swordsmen would slash at the creatures only for their blades to pass through them as if they were smoke, leaving the swordsman's own arm feeling cold and numb. They are conceptual, Sengoku bellowed from the bridge, his mind racing to analyze the threat. They have no physical bodies. Do not engage with standard tactics. But the alliance was composed of anything but standard fighters. Sue Bright. Kizaru's voice drawled as he transformed into a being of pure light. Appearing in the midst of a swarm of null forms. Yata no Kagami. He created a path of light, zipping between them, unleashing kicks at light speed. But the creatures were like black holes, they absorbed his light. The impacts barely staggering them. For the first time, Kizaru's infinite speed was met with absolute indifference. His lazy expression hardened into one of genuine annoyance. Akainu was a volcano of pure rage. You dare to bring your unnatural silence to my world. He roared, his body becoming a tide of magma. Ryusei Kazan. He launched thousands of magma fists into the sky. The attack was not meant to strike, but to incinerate. The null forms that were caught in the molten rain sizzled and dissolved, their forms unable to withstand the sheer, overwhelming destructive energy. But for every one he destroyed, two more seemed to pour from the vortex. He was a force of nature holding back an endless, silent tide. Doflamingo was a master puppeteer in a theater of madness. Parasite, he shouted, his strings attaching to the null forms. To his shock, the strings didn't control them. They simply dissolved where they touched. He changed tactics instantly, his strings latching onto his own allies. Manipulating marine battleships like marionettes, their cannons providing cover fire while his own hockey-infused strings, sharp as monofilament wire, sliced through the less dense creatures. He was a chaotic but brutally effective battlefield controller. Amidst the chaos, Mahawk was an island of lethal calm. He stood on the railing of the flagship, Uru in hand. A massive null form, a vaguely draconic beast of solidified shadow, descended upon him. He did not meet its charge. He waited, he watched. He saw it not as a creature, but as a flaw in the world, a stitch in the tapestry that was wrong. He remembered the lesson from G7. With a single, fluid motion, he drew his blade. The slash he unleashed was black, a sliver of darkness purer than the creature itself. It was a cut of pure intent, aimed not at the creature's form, but at the conceptual anchor that held it together. The draconic shadow split in two, dissolving into nothingness without a sound. He was not just a swordsman, he was an artist. And this was his terrible masterpiece. Hancock stood on the deck of the Perfume Yuta, a beacon of command. She was not engaging in single combat. Her role was far more crucial. As the vortex's psychic pressure bore down on the Allied fleet, threatening to crush the will of the lesser soldiers, she unleashed her own will. A massive wave of Conqueror's Haki, Infu, said with her love for Naruto and her determination to protect her world, erupted from her. It was not an attack. It was a shield, a conceptual buffer that pushed back against the void's aura of despair. allowing the soldiers to keep their sanity and continue fighting. She was the heart of the resistance, her spirit the shield for thousands. "We have to close it," Naruto said, his hand finding hers for a brief, reassuring squeeze. "The source is in the center of that vortex. The arbitrator is there. Then let's go pay him a visit," she replied, her eyes blazing with a fire that defied the encroaching grayness. Naruto gathered a sphere of his golden chakra around them, and they shot into the sky, a golden comet ascending into the heart of the wound in the world. Inside the vortex was a sea of chaotic, beautiful unreality. The laws of physics were a half-remembered suggestion. They flew past dying stars, through nebulae of silent screams, over fields of shattered possibilities. In the very center, on a platform of what looked like polished obsidian floating in the void, stood the arbitrator. He was no longer wearing his simple suit. His form was taller, more ethereal, woven from the same silent, star-dusted darkness as the vortex itself. He looked like a god of the end. "The chaotic variable," the arbitrator said, his voice the calm rustle of cosmic dust. "And the emotional anchor that tethers it. You have come, as I knew you would. You have gathered the other flaws, the other loud noises in the great silence, to rage against the inevitable. It is a pointless, beautiful gesture." "There's nothing beautiful about erasure," Naruto countered, he and Hancock landing on the platform. The 9 truth-seeking orbs materialized behind him, an absolute defense against the arbitrator's absolute offense. "Life isn't a flaw, it's the point. A flawed point," the arbitrator corrected serenely. "Full of pain, of loss, of conflict. All stemming from your precious attachments. The love you feel for her," he gestured to Hancock, "is the most potent form of this chaos. A singularity of unpredictability. For the system to be balanced, it must be removed." He raised a hand. A sphere of pure nothingness. A perfect black hole that did not pull matter in but simply erased its existence, formed in his palm. "Let the correction begin." He launched the sphere. Naruto met it with a Rasenshuriken, a miniature hurricane of blade-like wind chakra. The two attacks met. There was no explosion. The Rasenshuriken's violent, creative energy and the sphere's silent, unmaking energy annihilated each other in a flash of gray static. The battle that followed was a war of concepts. Naruto was a storm of creation, his truth-seeking orbs shifting into shields, spears, and platforms, his every attack a vibrant, life-affirming burst of energy. The arbitrator was a pit of entropy, his movements calm and economical, his every defense a patch of reality erased, every attack a tendril of silent oblivion. Hancock was not a bystander. She was the anchor. The arbitrator would lash out with psychic attacks, trying to dredge up her trauma, trying to sever her connection to Naruto. But she stood firm, her will a fortress. Her love for Naruto was not a weakness he could exploit, it was the source of her indomitable strength. Her haki flared around her, a visible, golden-pink aura that stabilized the very ground they stood on. Refusing to be unmade. "You see," Naruto shouted as he dodged a blade of pure void that cut a rift in the space behind him. "This is what you don't understand. Our bond doesn't make us weaker. It makes us real. It's the one thing your nothingness can't touch." For the first time, a flicker of something other than serene confidence appeared on the arbitrator's face. Frustration. He could match Naruto's power. He could counter his techniques. But he could not erase the conceptual weight of their connection. It was a law of reality in this small space that his void could not overwrite. Naruto saw his chance. He was trading blows, but it was a stalemate. He couldn't destroy the arbitrator, who was just a manifestation of the greater void. Destroying him here would be like trying to destroy the ocean by scooping out a cup of water. Kalen's legend, the warning from the sunken guardian, it all clicked into place. He couldn't destroy it. He had to seal it. He drove the arbitrator back with a massive Rasengan, a display of raw power to create an opening. "Hancock, I need time," he yelled. "I'm going to close this wound." She understood instantly. She moved to stand in front of him. Her body a living shield, her haki flaring to its absolute maximum. "You will not touch him," she roared at the arbitrator. Naruto sank to one knee, placing his palms on the obsidian platform. He closed his eyes and drew on everything. He pulled in the natural energy from the dying stars around them. He reached out with his senses and drew on the fierce, chaotic life energy. Why of the battle raging below? on Akainu's rage, Mahawk's focus, Doflamingo's ambition, and Hancock's love. He began to weave it all together into a complex, god-tier sealing formula, the most powerful jutsu he had ever attempted. The air around him crackled, golden chains of pure energy beginning to form, reaching for the edges of the vortex. The arbitrator saw what he was doing. He saw the reality he commanded beginning to fray, to be pulled inward by a force of order far more potent than his own. He was beaten. His correction had failed. He looked at Naruto, the source of his defeat, pouring all his energy into the Great Seal. And then he looked at Hancock, the defiant, chaotic variable who stood as his guardian. A cold, vindictive logic took root in his last moments. He could not win, but he could still prune the flaw. He could still prove his point. He gathered the last of his power, all the silent, unmaking energy of the vortex, into a single, focused point. He ignored Naruto, the true threat. He was aiming for the source of the chaos he hated so much. The attachment. Hancock saw the attack forming, a needle-thin ray of absolute blackness, an attack designed not to explode but to erase a single concept from existence. She saw it aimed directly at her. She knew she couldn't dodge it. She knew she couldn't block it. Naruto was behind her, his eyes closed, the seal only moments from completion. Completely vulnerable, the arbitrator smiled, a final, serene expression of a being completing its primary function. "Let the silence be your peace," he whispered. He fired. The ray of absolute erasure shot across the platform, a silent, unstoppable judgment aimed at the heart of the pirate empress. Chapter 9 End.